Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Anniversary Shadows. The hunting lodge stood like a sentinel against the backdrop of dense pine forest, its wooden facade weathered by decades of harsh Montana winters. Bryce Donovan killed the engine of his SUV and glanced at his wife, Lena, who was checking her reflection in the visor mirror. 15 years of marriage had dulled neither her beauty nor his appreciation for it, though lately, something had shifted between them, a subtle current of tension that neither acknowledged openly. "Daddy, are we there?" Finally, 6-year-old Mia bounced in her booster seat, her excitement piercing the strange heaviness that had settled between the adults. "Yes, Pumpkin, we're here." Bryce's voice softened when he addressed his daughter. His success as the founder of Donovan Security Systems had made him a hard man in business. Calculating, precise, unforgiving of weakness. But Mia had always been his blind spot, the one person who could reach past his armor. Lena's family had gathered at the Lancaster Hunting Lodge to celebrate Bryce and Lena's anniversary, a tradition that had always seemed more important to her family than to Bryce. His in-laws had never fully embraced him, viewing his rise from poverty to wealth with a mixture of respect and suspicion. The Lancasters had old money, Bryce had new money. The distinction mattered in their circles. As they unloaded the car, Bryce noticed how Lena's phone buzzed constantly. Each time, she would step away to answer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Business call?" he asked after the third such interruption. "Just the gallery. We have that new exhibition next month." Lena's art gallery had been his anniversary gift to her 5 years ago, a generous gesture meant to give her purpose beyond charity lunches and social events. Bryce nodded, keeping his expression neutral even as he cataloged the microscopic tells in her body language. The slight flush along her neck, the way her eyes wouldn't quite meet his. Something wasn't right. Inside, Lena's parents, Harold and Patricia Lancaster, greeted them with practiced warmth. Harold's handshake was firm but brief, Patricia's embrace perfunctory. "Bryce, you're looking well. Business must be booming." Harold's voice carried that familiar undercurrent of judgment, as though success in business somehow made Bryce less cultured, less worthy of his daughter. "Can't complain, Harold. The new government contracts are keeping us busy." Bryce matched the older man's tone, never revealing how deeply the subtle digs affected him. Dinner was a tense affair, with conversation flowing like cold molasses. Bryce observed how Lena kept checking her phone under the table, how her smile seemed forced. Her sister, Audrey, watched them both with curious eyes, too perceptive for comfort. Later that night, as Bryce unpacked in their bedroom, he found a small, leather-bound journal tucked into the side pocket of his suitcase, a journal he didn't recognize. Opening it revealed pages of entries in Lena's elegant handwriting. He shouldn't read it, he knew that. But something, intuition, perhaps, or the culmination of months of growing suspicion, made him turn to the most recent entry. "Dee says it's almost time. After all these years of planning, I can hardly believe we're this close. Sometimes I feel guilty about Bryce, about what this will do to him. But then I remember why we started this. He isn't who everyone thinks he is. Dee understands that. Dee has always understood." Bryce closed the journal, his hands steady even as his mind raced. Dee, who is Dee? And what exactly were Lena and this mysterious Dee planning? He replaced the journal exactly as he'd found it and finished unpacking, his face betraying nothing of the storm brewing inside him. That night, as Lena slept beside him, Bryce lay awake, staring at the ceiling, piecing together the subtle inconsistencies of the past year. Unexplained absences, hushed phone calls, the gradual withdrawal of affection. Whatever Lena was planning, he would be ready. No one who betrayed Bryce Donovan ever did so without consequences. That was a lesson his father had taught him early, and it was one he had never forgotten, not through the brutal foster homes of his youth or the cutthroat world of business he now dominated. As dawn broke over the mountains, Bryce had already formulated the beginnings of a plan. He would watch, wait, and when the time came, he would strike with the precision and ruthlessness that had made him both feared and respected in the business world. First, though, he needed proof, and he would get it one way or another. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Woods. The following morning dawned crisp and clear, perfect for the family hike Harold had planned. Bryce watched Lena as she prepared, noting how she slipped her phone into her pocket rather than leaving it behind as she usually would for a hike. "Beautiful day for a trek through the woods," Bryce commented, keeping his tone casual. "Yes, perfect." Lena's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Dad says there's a beautiful waterfall about 3 miles in. Mia will love it." The hiking party consisted of Bryce, Lena, Mia, Harold, Patricia, Audrey, and Audrey's husband, Glenn. They set out after breakfast, following a trail that wound through dense forest. Bryce deliberately kept to the back of the group, observing. Halfway through the hike, Lena received another call. She dropped back, telling the others to continue while she took it. Bryce, who had been teaching Mia about identifying animal tracks, told the others he and Mia would wait for Lena. "You all go ahead. We'll catch up," he assured Harold, who nodded and led the others forward. Once they were alone, Bryce pretended to be engrossed in showing Mia a deer print while actually straining to hear Lena's conversation. Her voice was too low to make out specific words, but the intimate tone was unmistakable. This was no business call. When Lena returned, her cheeks were flushed and not from exertion. "Ready to catch up with the others?" she asked brightly. "Actually, Mia was just telling me she's tired. I think we'll head back to the lodge, maybe do some fishing at the lake instead." Bryce's tone was light, giving Lena no reason to suspect his true intentions. Lena hesitated. "I can come back with you. No need to ruin your hike. We'll be fine, won't we, Pumpkin?" Bryce looked down at Mia, who nodded enthusiastically at the mention of fishing. "Well, if you're sure." Lena seemed almost relieved, which only confirmed Bryce's suspicions. As they turned back toward the lodge, Mia grew quiet. Bryce noticed her unusual demeanor and knelt down to her level. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" Mia kicked at a pine cone, avoiding his eyes. "Daddy, I need to tell you something bad." Bryce's heart thumped against his ribs, but his voice remained steady. "You can tell me anything, Mia. You know that. I saw Mommy bury something by the big tree last night." Mia's voice was barely above a whisper. "What big tree, sweetie?" Bryce kept his tone gentle, though his mind was racing. "The one with the swing. After you went to sleep, I got up to get water and saw Mommy from my window. She had a flashlight and a shovel." Bryce nodded thoughtfully. "Did you see what she buried?" Mia shook her head. "It was in a box. A metal box. Did Mommy see you watching?" "No. I hid when she looked up." Bryce gave his daughter a reassuring smile. "You did nothing wrong, Mia. Sometimes grown-ups have secrets, that's all." He squeezed her small hand. "Now, how about that fishing?" They spent the afternoon at the lake, Bryce teaching Mia how to cast a line while his mind worked through what she had told him. The old oak with the tire swing stood at the edge of the property, visible from Mia's bedroom window, but secluded enough for privacy. What had Lena buried there? And what did it have to do with the mysterious D? Later that evening, after dinner, Bryce made a show of drinking more bourbon than usual, slurring his words slightly as he announced he was turning in early. In their bedroom, he arranged pillows under the covers to resemble his sleeping form, then slipped out through the window once the house had quieted. The night was moonless, perfect for his purpose. Using the small tactical flashlight from his keychain, Bryce made his way to the oak tree. The earth around its base showed signs of recent disturbance, a section where the pine needles had been cleared away and replaced, not quite matching the surrounding ground. Returning to the tool shed, Bryce retrieved a shovel and began to dig where Mia had indicated. After about 2 feet, the shovel struck something solid. Brushing away the soil, he uncovered a metal lockbox, the kind used for important documents. The lock was no challenge for a man who had built his fortune on security systems. Within minutes, Bryce had it open, his flashlight illuminating the contents: a USB drive, several photographs, and a folded document. The photographs made his blood run cold. They showed Bryce with a woman, not Lena, in various intimate settings. But Bryce recognized the woman immediately: Sophia Reed, a former client who had tried and failed to seduce him 3 years ago after he installed a security system in her penthouse. These photos were expertly doctored, making it appear as though they had been having an affair. The document was a draft of divorce papers, citing infidelity, with notes in the margins about financial settlements that would strip Bryce of half his assets. The USB drive contained more fabricated evidence, edited emails, fake hotel receipts, even a voice recording that had been spliced together to make it sound like Bryce was admitting to the affair. As he examined each piece of evidence, the full picture began to emerge. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to create an elaborate fiction, a fiction that would destroy him in a divorce court. And Lena was clearly involved. Bryce carefully replaced everything in the lockbox and reburied it, making sure to leave the site exactly as he had found it. As he walked back to the lodge, his mind was eerily calm. He had always known that his success would make him a target, but he never expected the attack to come from the person he trusted most. Back in the bedroom, lying beside his sleeping wife, Bryce made a solemn vow to himself. He would find out who Dee was. He would uncover the full extent of this conspiracy. And when he did, he would make them pay, all of them, in ways they couldn't begin to imagine. His father's words echoed in his mind. The world is divided into predators and prey, son. Make sure you're never the prey. Bryce had lived by those words, building an empire from nothing, and he wouldn't let anyone, not even Lena, take it away from him. As dawn approached, Bryce finally drifted into sleep, his dreams filled with strategies and contingency plans. The hunt had begun. Chapter 3. Beneath the Surface. The next morning, Bryce woke before Lena, his mind clear despite the minimal sleep. He showered and dressed, donning the mask of normalcy with practiced ease. When Lena stirred, he was already checking emails on his tablet, the picture of a husband balancing work and vacation. "Morning," he said, offering her a smile that revealed nothing of what he now knew. "Sleep well. Like a rock." Lena stretched languorously. "You were out like a light last night. That bourbon really hit you hard." "Guess I'm getting old," Bryce chuckled, playing along. "What's on the agenda today?" "Mom wants to take me into town for shopping. I thought maybe you and I could spend some time together. It's our anniversary weekend, after all." There was something calculated in her suggestion, something that would have gone unnoticed had Bryce not been looking for it. "Sounds perfect." The lie came easily. "I need to make a few work calls first, then I'm all yours." Once Lena headed to the shower, Bryce slipped her phone from the nightstand. He'd installed the security system in this lodge himself 3 years ago, which meant he knew about the hidden safe in Harold's study. If Lena was involved in something nefarious, there might be evidence there. While the rest of the family enjoyed breakfast, Bryce excused himself, claiming he needed to handle an urgent work situation. In the study, he quickly located the safe behind a panel of bookshelves. The combination hadn't changed. Harold's birthday, predictably, and within moments, Bryce was examining its contents. Among various legal documents and family heirlooms, he found a manila envelope with his name written on it. Inside was a comprehensive dossier on his life, including details that weren't public knowledge. His childhood in foster care after his father's imprisonment, his first failed business venture, even the restraining order his college girlfriend had filed against him, later dropped when she admitted to fabricating the allegations. Most disturbing were the notes in a handwriting he didn't recognize, speculating about skeletons in Bryce's closet that could be leveraged. One note read, "Financial pressure alone won't break him. Need personal leverage. Investigates sister." Bryce's sister, Abigail, was his only living blood relative, a recovering addict who had straightened out her life with his help. The idea that someone would target her as a way to get to him filled him with cold rage. He photographed everything with his phone, then carefully replaced the documents. His mind was working overtime, connecting dots, formulating theories. Whatever was happening involved not just Lena, but potentially her entire family. The question was why? What did they stand to gain from destroying him? Later that day, while Lena and Mia were out shopping with Patricia, Bryce made a secure call to Vincent Mercer, his head of security and the one person he trusted implicitly. Vincent had been with him since the beginning, a former military intelligence officer who had saved Bryce's life during a business trip to South America that had gone sideways. I need you to run a deep background on everyone in the Lancaster family, particularly any new associates in the last 2 years, Bryce instructed. And I need eyes on Abigail. Discreet protection, 24/7. Consider it done, Vincent replied, asking no questions. Anything else? Yes. The name D could be a first name, last name, nickname. Someone connected to the Lancasters, possibly romantically involved with Lena. Saying it out loud made it real in a way that twisted Bryce's gut, but he kept his voice steady. I'll get my team on it immediately. Should I prepare the contingency protocols? The contingency protocols were emergency measures they had established years ago, ways to secure assets, communications, and personnel in case of a severe threat to the company or Bryce personally. Not yet, but be ready. Bryce ended the call, his decision made. He would play along for now, gather information, identify all the players in this game. Then, when the time was right, he would strike with such devastating precision that they would never recover. That evening, the Lancasters hosted a small dinner party, inviting a few neighboring families. Bryce played his part flawlessly, the successful businessman, the loving husband, the doting father. No one would have guessed the calculations happening behind his smile. Midway through dinner, a new guest arrived, fashionably late. Sorry for the delay, the man apologized as Harold introduced him around the table. Flight from Seattle was delayed. David Kessler, the newcomer said, extending his hand to Bryce. I've heard so much about you. Bryce didn't miss the momentary flash of tension in Lena's eyes at the introduction. David. D. It couldn't be a coincidence. All good things, I hope, Bryce replied smoothly, studying the man. David Kessler was about his age, impeccably dressed, with the easy confidence of old money. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced. Lena speaks very highly of your business acumen, David said, taking the seat opposite Bryce. We have mutual interests in the art world, actually. I'm a collector. David has an amazing eye, Lena added, her voice just a touch too enthusiastic. He's helped the gallery acquire some significant pieces. The conversation flowed around them, but Bryce was hyper-aware of every glance between Lena and David, every subtle shift in body language. They were careful, but not careful enough for someone trained to notice micro-expressions as Bryce was. After dinner, as the party moved to the great room for drinks, Bryce excused himself to take a call. Instead, he slipped into the guest room where David was staying and quickly searched his belongings. In the inner pocket of David's suit jacket, he found a small notepad with what appeared to be meeting dates, one of which corresponded to their anniversary weekend. Next to the date was a single word, confirmation. Bryce photographed the notepad and continued his search, finding nothing else of interest except a business card identifying David as the principal of Kessler Investment Group. He'd have Vincent look into that. Returning to the party, Bryce observed David charming the room, particularly Patricia Lancaster, who seemed especially taken with him. Harold, too, treated David with a deference he'd never shown Bryce, despite their similar backgrounds in finance. More bourbon. David appeared at Bryce's side, offering to refill his glass. Just a splash. Bryce studied the man, trying to discern what made him so appealing to the Lancasters and to Lena. Harold tells me you're in private equity, among other things. David's smile was enigmatic. I specialize in identifying undervalued assets and realizing their potential. There was something predatory in his phrasing that set off alarm bells in Bryce's mind. David wasn't just a rival for Lena's affection. He was a threat to everything Bryce had built. As the evening wound down, Bryce watched David place his hand at the small of Lena's back as they thought no one was looking, a gesture too intimate to be casual. Lena leaned into the touch briefly before pulling away, her eyes darting around the room guiltily. In that moment, the final piece clicked into place for Bryce. This wasn't just about an affair or a divorce. This was about a hostile takeover of his company, his wealth, his life. David Kessler and the Lancasters were working together, using Lena as their Trojan horse. Back in their bedroom, as Lena prepared for bed, Bryce maintained his facade of ignorant contentment. But inside, he was already at war. They had underestimated him, assumed that his love for Lena would blind him to their machinations. It was a miscalculation that would cost them everything. As he drifted off to sleep, Bryce was already formulating his counterattack. They want to play games? Fine. But they were playing against a man who had clawed his way up from nothing, who had survived betrayals and backstabbing that would have destroyed a lesser man. A man who never forgave, never forgot, and never, ever lost. The hunt was on, and they didn't even know they were the prey. Chapter 4. The Spider's Web. The anniversary weekend concluded with practiced smiles and hollow promises to do this again soon. Bryce drove his family back to their sprawling estate in the Virginia countryside, maintaining his performance as the oblivious husband. Inside, however, his mind was constructing a web of his own, intricate, invisible, and utterly inescapable once sprung. The first thread of that web began with information. In his home office, secured against electronic surveillance, a precaution that had once seemed paranoid but now proved prescient, Bryce reviewed Vincent's preliminary findings on David Kessler. Kessler's background is impressive on paper, Vincent reported via secure line. Princeton, Harvard Business School, stints at Goldman and BlackRock before founding Kessler Investment Group 8 years ago. Assets under management totaling nearly $2 billion. Too clean? Bryce asked, recognizing the pattern from his own due diligence investigations. Like it was manufactured. We found discrepancies in his early career, gaps that don't align with his claimed positions. And his investment group's performance metrics don't match their reported returns. They're burning cash faster than they're making it. So he needs money. Bryce tapped his fingers thoughtfully on his desk. What about the Lancasters? Harold's commercial real estate holdings took a major hit during the pandemic. He's leveraged to the eyeballs, keeping up appearances while teetering on bankruptcy. Your security company would be a lifeline, steady government contracts, proprietary technology patents, liquid assets. The picture was becoming clearer. And Lena's connection to Kessler? They met through the art gallery, apparently. But we found hotel records showing they've been meeting at least monthly for the past year. Always high-end places, always under pseudonyms. The confirmation of Lena's betrayal should have hurt more, Bryce thought. Instead, he felt a cold clarity descending, the same clarity that had guided him through the most challenging business negotiations. There's more. Vincent hesitated. They've been approaching your board members, discreetly testing the waters for support in a takeover, using the fabricated evidence of your affair as leverage, suggesting you're unstable, making poor decisions due to personal issues. So that was their play. Destroy his reputation, undermine confidence in his leadership, force him out while using Lena's position as his wife to secure her a controlling interest in the divorce. It was elegant, he had to admit, and it might have worked if they hadn't underestimated him so severely. Your sister is secure, Vincent added. We've moved her to the lake house with round-the-clock security. Told her it's a precaution due to a potential business rival. She doesn't know the details. Keep it that way. Bryce trusted Abigail, but the less she knew, the safer she would be. What about the board? Mixed reactions. Crawford and Donaldson seem receptive to Kessler's overtures. The others are waiting to see which way the wind blows. Pull the private files on Crawford and Donaldson. Everyone has secrets. Find theirs. The next morning, Bryce suggested to Lena that they host a dinner party the following weekend. Let's invite your new art friend. David, was it? I like to get to know him better. Maybe there's an investment opportunity there. Lena's surprise was evident, though she tried to mask it. That's a great idea. I'll call him today. Wonderful. Oh, and see if your parents can come. It's been ages since we've had them to the house. As Lena made her calls, Bryce set the next phase of his plan in motion. He contacted Sophia Reed, the woman in the doctor photos. Sophia, it's Bryce Donovan. I have a business proposition for you. Sophia, now a successful real estate agent to the ultra-wealthy, was intrigued by Bryce's offer, a substantial fee to play a role in what he described as a security exercise. All she needed to do was attend his dinner party and follow his lead. Over the next few days, Bryce made a show of being distracted, taking private calls, working late hours. He left his personal laptop open with emails to Sophia in his browsing history. Emails discussing their meeting at the upcoming dinner. Just enough breadcrumbs to suggest that what the fabricated evidence implied might actually be true. He knew Lena would look. She always did when he was away from his devices, a habit he had noticed months ago but never confronted her about. Now, it served his purpose perfectly. The night before the dinner party, Bryce's home security system alerted him to movement in his office at 2 a.m. The cameras showed Lena at his computer, downloading files to a USB drive, the same fabricated evidence he had found buried at the lodge, now planted on his own computer by him as a trap. She was taking the bait, exactly as he had anticipated. The dinner party was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Bryce had arranged for Sophia to arrive just as everyone was settling in for drinks. The momentary flash of panic on Lena's face when Bryce introduced Sophia as an old friend was worth every penny he was paying her. "Sophia and I go way back," Bryce said, his hand lingering just a fraction too long on her arm. "She's been instrumental in some recent investments." Throughout dinner, Bryce and Sophia exchanged knowing glances and inside jokes, their behavior just suggestive enough to raise eyebrows. David Kessler watched the interaction with barely concealed satisfaction, while Harold and Patricia Lancaster exchanged meaningful looks. "David," Bryce said as dessert was being served, "Lena tells me you have quite an eye for valuable acquisitions. I'd love to hear more about your approach." "It's all about recognizing potential where others don't," David replied smoothly, "and having the courage to make decisive moves when opportunities present themselves." "I couldn't agree more." Bryce raised his glass in a toast. To decisive moves. After dinner, Bryce deliberately left David and Lena alone in the library while he gave Sophia a tour of the house, making sure they were gone just long enough to encourage conversation between the conspirators. What they didn't know was that every room in Bryce's house was equipped with state-of-the-art surveillance that was currently recording their every word. "He's having an affair," Lena whispered urgently to David once they were alone. "With her. It's perfect. We don't even need the fabricated evidence now. We have the real thing." "Are you sure?" David sounded skeptical. "It seems too convenient. I found emails, hotel receipts, all recent." He's been sloppy, overconfident. Lena's voice was triumphant. "We can move up the timeline. File the papers next week instead of waiting until after the board meeting." "What about your daughter?" "The prenup has provisions about infidelity and custody. Mia will adjust. She'll still see him, of course, but primary custody will be with me. The judge will take one look at those photos and emails, and the prenup's fidelity clause will be triggered. I'll get control of his voting shares as part of the settlement." "And the board?" David pressed. "Crawford and Donaldson are already on board. With my shares and theirs, we'll have enough to force Bryce out. The company will be ours, and he'll never know what hit him." In his security room, watching the conversation unfold on multiple screens, Bryce felt no pain at Lena's betrayal, only cold satisfaction at having confirmed every suspicion. They had revealed their entire plan, unaware that every word was being recorded. Evidence that would be inadmissible in court, perhaps, but invaluable for what Bryce had planned. As the evening wound down and their guest departed, Bryce kissed Lena on the cheek. "That went well, don't you think?" "Very well," she agreed, her eyes calculating beneath her smile. "David was impressed with your operation. Said there might be partnership opportunities. I look forward to exploring them," Bryce replied, the irony of his words lost on her. That night, as Lena slept beside him for what he knew would be one of the last times, Bryce finalized his countermeasures. Board members Crawford and Donaldson would find their own secrets exposed if they moved against him. David Kessler's financial house of cards would collapse with a few strategic calls to the SEC and his major investors. And Lena would lose everything she had plotted to steal from him. But first, he needed to secure what mattered most: Mia. The revelation of Lena's willingness to use their daughter as a pawn in her scheme had awakened something primal in Bryce, a ferocity that would reshape his plan from mere self-preservation to complete annihilation of his enemies. As dawn broke, Bryce slipped out of bed and went to his daughter's room. Watching her sleep, innocent and unaware of the storm gathering around their family, he made a silent promise. When this was over, she would never have to doubt where she belonged or who truly loved her. And those who had sought to use her as leverage would pay the ultimate price. Chapter 5. Counter-moves. The week following the dinner party unfolded exactly as Bryce had predicted. Lena's behavior grew increasingly secretive, punctuated by hushed phone calls and unexplained absences. She was setting the stage for her exit, unaware that Bryce was 10 steps ahead. His first counter-move targeted the financial foundation of their scheme. Vincent had uncovered that Kessler Investment Group was essentially a sophisticated Ponzi scheme, using new investor funds to pay returns to earlier investors while siphoning millions into offshore accounts. With this information, Bryce arranged an anonymous tip to both the SEC and several of Kessler's largest investors, attaching enough documentation to spark a serious investigation. Next, he focused on the Lancaster family's vulnerabilities. Harold's precarious financial situation offered the perfect pressure point. Through a series of shell companies, Bryce quietly acquired the debt on Harold's largest commercial properties, positioning himself as the senior creditor. One call could trigger a cascade of margin calls that would wipe out the Lancaster family fortune within days. For board members Crawford and Donaldson, Bryce employed more personal leverage. Crawford, it turned out, had been embezzling from the company's charitable foundation for years. Small amounts, skillfully concealed, but detectable by someone who knew where to look. Donaldson's weakness was more personal. An adult son with multiple DUIs that had been covered up through judicial connections that Bryce now controlled. Everything is in place, Vincent confirmed during their secure daily briefing. We can pull the trigger whenever you give the word. Not yet, Bryce replied. There's still Mia to consider. That evening, as Mia was getting ready for bed, Bryce sat on the edge of her bed, heart heavy with what he needed to ask. Pumpkin, do you remember when you told me about Mommy burying something by the tree? Mia nodded solemnly. I need to ask you something else, and it's very important that you tell me the truth. Has Mommy ever talked to you about maybe living somewhere else? Or about Daddy going away? Mia's lower lip trembled. She said maybe we would live with Grandma and Grandpa for a while, and that a new friend might come stay with us. She made me promise not to tell you. The confirmation of Lena's manipulation of their daughter hardened Bryce's resolve. You didn't do anything wrong by telling me. Sometimes grown-ups keep secrets that they shouldn't. Are you mad at Mommy? Mia's eyes were wide with childish perception. No, Pumpkin. I'm just sad that she made choices that will change things for us. It wasn't quite a lie. Beyond the cold rage that fueled his planning, there was a profound sadness for what might have been. But I promise you, no matter what happens, you and I will always be together. Okay. After tucking Mia in, Bryce made a call to his attorney, Maxwell Brighton, not the family lawyer who handled their estate planning, but his personal counsel, a shark who operated in the shadows of high-stakes corporate warfare. I need custodial preparations, Mac's full documentation of parental alienation, evidence of conspiracy to violate the prenuptial agreement, and emergency temporary custody motions ready to file at a moment's notice. Based on what you've sent over, we have a strong case, Brighton replied. But are you sure you want to go nuclear here? Once these accusations are public. I'm not interested in public, Bryce cut him off. I want this handled privately, with maximum leverage. They think they're taking everything from me. I want them to understand what it really means to lose everything. The following day, Bryce received a text from Lena, working late at the gallery. New installation. Don't wait up. A quick check of his surveillance network showed her actually meeting with David Kessler and a man Bryce recognized as one of the top divorce attorneys in the state. They were making their move, unaware that every aspect of their plan had been compromised. That evening, alone in the house save for Mia and her nanny, Bryce executed the next phase of his counterstrike. He initiated transfers of his most valuable personal assets to irrevocable trusts for Mia's benefit. Trusts structured in such a way that neither Lena nor any future spouse could ever access them, regardless of custody arrangements. Next, he activated Protocol Exodus, an emergency contingency he had established years ago but never expected to use. It transferred operational control of Donovan's security systems to a separate board of trustees for a period of 6 months, effectively removing it as an asset that could be contested in any divorce proceeding. Finally, he made a series of calls to his most loyal executives, informing them of a potential hostile takeover attempt and securing their allegiance through a combination of financial incentives and appeals to their loyalty. By midnight, the stage was set. When Lena returned home at nearly 1 a.m., Bryce was waiting in the darkened living room, a glass of bourbon in his hand. "Productive evening?" he asked as she entered, causing her to jump slightly. "God, Bryce, you scared me." She composed herself quickly. "Yes, very. The new installation is coming together nicely." "Interesting. I wasn't aware divorce attorneys had artistic talents." The color drained from Lena's face. "What are you talking about?" "Please, Lena, let's not insult each other's intelligence any further." Bryce's voice was dangerously soft. "I know about David. I know about the plan to take control of my company. I know about all of it." For a moment, Lena seemed genuinely speechless. Then, her expression hardened. "You can't prove anything. I don't need to prove it in court. Although I could." Bryce sipped his bourbon. "The question is what happens now?" Lena's facade cracked, revealing the calculating woman beneath. "What do you want?" "A clean break. You walk away with what you brought into the marriage. Nothing more, nothing less. You surrender any claim to custody of Mia. You and your family never contact us again." "That's absurd. No court would." "This isn't about courts, Lena. This is about consequences." Bryce's tone remained conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Your father is 72 hours away from total financial collapse. David's investment firm will be raided by federal agents within the week. And as for you," he paused meaningfully, "let's just say that the prenup violation clause works both ways. Your infidelity is extensively documented. You're bluffing." But her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe, but ask yourself, can you afford to call that bluff? Because if you force my hand, I promise you, there will be nothing left of your life to salvage." Bryce stood, setting down his glass. "You have 24 hours to decide. After that, events will take on a momentum of their own." As he walked past her toward the stairs, Lena grabbed his arm. "This isn't over, Bryce. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Bryce looked down at her hand until she removed it. "That's where you're wrong, Lena. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. The question is whether you know who you've provoked." Later that night, as he lay in the guest bedroom, reviewing security footage of Lena frantically calling David and her father, Bryce felt no satisfaction, only the cold certainty that he was doing what was necessary to protect himself and Mia. The following morning, he woke early and took Mia to her favorite breakfast spot, maintaining normalcy for her sake while the adults in her life engaged in silent warfare. When they returned, Lena was waiting, her expression unreadable. "We need to talk," she said. "Without Mia." Bryce nodded to the nanny, who took Mia upstairs to play. Once they were alone, Lena spoke with calculated precision. "I'll sign whatever you want regarding the prenup and financial settlement. But I want joint custody of Mia. That's non-negotiable." Bryce had anticipated this, using their daughter as the one bargaining chip she thought he wouldn't sacrifice. "No, she's my daughter too, Bryce. Whatever is between us doesn't change that. You were willing to manipulate her, to use her as a pawn in your scheme." Bryce's voice was flat. "You forfeited any moral claim to parenthood the moment you did that. You can't keep her from me. No judge would allow it. Perhaps not under normal circumstances. But these aren't normal circumstances, are they, Lena?" Bryce slid a folder across the coffee table. "These are sworn affidavits from your art gallery assistant detailing how you've consistently prioritized your meetings with David over Mia's school events and doctor appointments. This is documentation of the times you've left her with nannies while claiming to be with her to cover your tracks. And this," he tapped a final document, "is a psychological evaluation indicating the emotional damage caused by your attempts to alienate her from me." The blood drained from Lena's face as she flipped through the damning evidence. "How did you?" "I protect what's mine, Lena. Always have. You just never realized that included protecting it from you. Bryce's tone was matter of fact. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign full custody over to me, with visitation rights that I will determine based on Mia's best interests. You're going to sign a revised settlement that gives you exactly $1 million, enough to start over somewhere far from here. And you're going to do it today. And if I refuse? There was a tremor in her voice now, the first real indication that she understood the depth of her miscalculation. Then tomorrow, your father's creditors call on his loans. David's investors receive proof of his fraud, and you find yourself defending not just a divorce action, but potential criminal charges for conspiracy. Bryce stood. The documents are with my attorney. He's expecting you at noon. Lena stared at him, eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. I never thought you had this in you. That was your first mistake. Bryce walked to the door. Don't make another by testing my resolve. For Mia's sake, if nothing else. As Lena left to meet with his attorney, Bryce allowed himself a moment of reflection. The woman he had loved, the mother of his child, had revealed herself to be a stranger, a predator who had mistaken him for prey. It was a mistake she would live with for the rest of her life. By sunset, it was done. Lena had signed every document, surrendering custody, accepting the financial terms, effectively excising herself from their lives. As part of the agreement, she would leave immediately for a sabbatical in Europe, a convenient cover story for what was essentially exile. As Bryce watched her pack her belongings under the watchful eye of his security team, he felt no triumph, only a cold certainty that he had done what was necessary to protect his daughter and his legacy. The predator had become the prey, just as his father had warned so many years ago. But the hunt wasn't over. David Kessler and the Lancasters remained, and for them, Bryce had planned a reckoning that would ensure they never threatened him or Mia again. The true endgame was just beginning. Chapter 6: The Precipice. The following weeks unfolded with the precision of a meticulously orchestrated symphony, each movement building toward Bryce's ultimate crescendo of revenge. With Lena now in self-imposed exile in the south of France, her artistic sabbatical explained away to friends and associates with practiced ease, Bryce turned his attention to the remaining conspirators. David Kessler was the next to fall. The anonymous tips to the SEC and his major investors had sparked exactly the storm Bryce had anticipated. Federal agents raided Kessler Investment Group's offices, seizing records and freezing assets. Headlines blared about potential financial irregularities and investor concerns, sending Kessler's clients into a panic. Bryce watched from the shadows as Kessler's empire began to crumble, making no direct moves against him, yet allowing the momentum of the investigation to build naturally. It was the perfect cover. No one would suspect Bryce's involvement when Kessler had so many enemies among his defrauded investors. Meanwhile, Harold Lancaster found himself increasingly squeezed by his creditors. Properties that had been pillars of the Lancaster fortune for generations were suddenly underwater, with loans being called in by mysterious new entities that showed no interest in negotiation or extensions. The Lancasters are desperate, Vincent reported during their daily briefing. Harold has approached 3 different banks for emergency financing. All have declined. And Patricia? Bryce asked, knowing that Lena's mother had always been the more cunning of the pair. Making calls to family connections, try to leverage social capital into financial bailouts. No takers so far. The word is out in their circles. The Lancasters are toxic. Bryce nodded, satisfied with the progress. What about Crawford and Donaldson? Both have withdrawn their support for any board action against you. Crawford has actually submitted his resignation, effective end of quarter. Cites personal reasons. Have legal send him a very generous severance package. And make sure Donaldson knows that his son's legal troubles have mysteriously disappeared. Vincent raised an eyebrow. Carrot and stick. People remember who helped them in crisis, Bryce replied. And they remember who hurt them. I want Crawford grateful and Donaldson terrified. Both serve my purposes. With his corporate position secure and his personal life stabilizing around a new normal with Mia, Bryce might have been content to let his enemies suffer their financial and legal consequences from afar. But then came a call that changed everything. Mr. Donovan, His assistant's voice was uncharacteristically tense. "There's a Detective Ramirez here to see you. She says it's about your sister." Ice formed in Bryce's veins. "Send her in immediately." Detective Elena Ramirez was a compact woman with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Mr. Donovan, I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Your sister, Abigail, was involved in an incident last night." "What kind of incident?" Bryce's voice was steady, though his pulse had accelerated. "She's alive," Ramirez assured him quickly. "But she's in the hospital. Someone broke into her home and injected her with heroin. A deliberate overdose made it look like a relapse. If her security detail hadn't found her when they did, the implication hung in the air. Abigail would be dead. Another addict who'd fallen off the wagon. Nothing suspicious about it to the casual observer. "Where is she now?" Bryce was already on his feet. "Memorial Hospital, under police protection. We have reason to believe this wasn't random. Given your position and your sister's history." "I know exactly who's responsible," Bryce cut her off. "And I'll give you everything you need to make the case." Within the hour, Bryce was at Abigail's bedside, watching his sister's pale face as machines monitored her vital signs. She had been clean for 6 years, rebuilding her life with determination after her addiction had nearly destroyed her. The idea that someone would exploit her past vulnerability as a way to hurt him transformed Bryce's cold calculation into white-hot rage. When she regained consciousness, her first words broke something deep inside him. "I didn't do it, Bryce. I swear I didn't relapse." "I know, Abby. I know." He took her hand, careful of the 4 lines. "This wasn't your fault, and the people responsible will pay. I promise you that." Back at his office, Bryce summoned Vincent. "I want everything we have on David Kessler and the Lancasters. Every connection, every shell company, every dirty deal. And I want it now." The attack on Abigail had crossed a line Bryce hadn't anticipated. Using his sister as a weapon against him wasn't just business. It was personal in a way that demanded a response beyond financial ruin or legal consequences. Within hours, Vincent had assembled a comprehensive dossier linking Kessler to a network of offshore entities used for money laundering and tax evasion. More damning were records of payments to individuals with ties to organized crime, including one made the day before the attack on Abigail. "There's something else," Vincent said, hesitation evident in his voice. "Lena made a call to David Kessler 2 days ago from her hotel in Nice. It lasted 26 minutes. The implication was clear. Despite her seeming capitulation, Lena was still involved, perhaps even instrumental in the plot against Abigail. She never intended to honor our agreement," Bryce said, more to himself than to Vincent. "This was always part of their contingency plan. If they couldn't get to me directly, they'd use Abigail as leverage." "What's our next move?" Vincent asked. Bryce stared out his office window at the Washington, D.C. skyline. The corridors of power spread before him like a game board. "It's time to end this. Permanently." Over the next 72 hours, Bryce executed a series of moves designed not just to defeat his enemies, but to annihilate them so completely that they would never have the capacity to threaten him or his family again. First, he delivered the evidence linking Kessler to organized crime directly to the FBI, ensuring that what had begun as a financial investigation now had criminal implications that would guarantee serious prison time. Next, he triggered the collapse of the Lancaster financial house of cards. As their primary creditor through his shell companies, he called in all loans simultaneously, forcing the liquidation of assets at fire sale prices. Assets that his own companies then purchased anonymously, completing the circle of destruction. For Lena, he implemented what he privately termed Protocol Judas, a specialized form of financial and social isolation he had developed but never before deployed. Her credit cards were canceled, her passport flagged in international databases, her social media accounts compromised, her friends and contacts subtly informed of her true nature through carefully orchestrated leaks of selected information. Within days, Lena found herself stranded in France, her money access restricted to a small monthly stipend, her reputation in tatters, her former friends abandoning her one by one as the carefully constructed narrative of her betrayal spread through their social circles. The final piece came in the form of a video call, arranged through layers of proxies to ensure it couldn't be traced or recorded. Lena's face appeared on Bryce's screen, her composure cracking for the first time he could remember. "What have you done?" Her voice trembled with a mixture of fury and fear. "I've done exactly what I promised I would do if you broke our agreement." Bryce's tone was conversational, as though they were discussing the weather. "You chose to target my sister. That was a mistake. I had nothing to do with that. That was David. After you called him. After you spent 26 minutes planning it together." Bryce smiled coldly. "Did you really think I wouldn't have you monitored? That I would trust you to simply walk away?" Lena's face paled. "What do you want from me? I've already signed everything away." "I don't want anything from you, Lena. Not anymore. I simply wanted you to understand the consequences of your choices." Bryce leaned closer to the camera. "You are finished. Not just financially or socially, but in every way that matters. You will spend the rest of your life in exile, watching from afar as Mia grows up without you, as your family loses everything they've built over generations, as David rots in federal prison for crimes you helped him commit. You can't do this. It's inhuman. No more inhuman than targeting a recovering addict in an attempt to manipulate her brother. No more inhuman than plotting to use your own daughter as leverage in a custody battle." Bryce's voice hardened. "You made me your enemy, Lena. Now you get to live with the consequences." "This isn't over," she hissed, desperation giving way to hatred. "It was over the moment Mia saw you burying that box." Bryce's smile never reached his eyes. "Goodbye, Lena." He terminated the call, knowing it would be their last communication. The walls were closing in on all of them. Kessler facing federal charges, the Lancasters watching their fortune evaporate, and Lena, isolated and powerless, her schemes in ruins around her. As evening fell, Bryce sat with Mia in their home theater, watching one of her favorite animated films. She had adjusted to Lena's absence with the resilience of childhood, accepting the simplified explanation that Mommy needed to go away for a while to think about some choices she made. "Daddy," she asked during a quiet moment in the film, "when is Mommy coming back?" Bryce stroked her hair gently. "I don't think Mommy will be coming back, Pumpkin. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that change everything, and there's no going back." Mia considered this with a serious expression that always made her look older than her years. "Are you sad?" "I was," Bryce answered truthfully. "But now I'm just focused on making sure you and I have the best life possible. That's what matters to me." Mia nodded, seemingly satisfied with his answer, and turned her attention back to the movie. Bryce watched her profile in the flickering light from the screen, recognizing in her features echoes of both himself and Lena. Whatever happened, he would make sure she grew up knowing she was loved and protected, even if that protection had required measures that she would never fully understand. Later that night, as Bryce reviewed the final reports from Vincent detailing the complete dismantling of his enemies' lives, he felt no joy, no triumph. Only the cold satisfaction of knowing that those who had sought to destroy him had instead destroyed themselves by underestimating his capacity for ruthlessness when threatened. His father's words echoed in his mind once more. The world is divided into predators and prey. The Lancasters, Kessler, and even Lena had mistaken his success for vulnerability, his love for weakness. It was a miscalculation they would spend the rest of their lives regretting. As he closed the file on what he now thought of as the Lancaster affair, Bryce made a silent vow to himself and to Mia. Never again would he allow anyone close enough to threaten what mattered to him. Never again would he mistake loyalty for love. And never, ever would he forgive those who betrayed him, a lesson his enemies had learned at devastating cost. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new threats to navigate. But tonight, Bryce Donovan slept the sleep of a predator whose territory was secure once more, his enemies scattered, his family protected, his legacy intact. It was, he reflected, as sleep claimed him, all that truly mattered in the end. Chapter 7. Echoes of Betrayal. 6 months passed, seasons changing from winter to spring as Bryce rebuilt his life around the new reality. With Lena gone and the immediate threat neutralized, he focused on creating stability for Mia while continuing to monitor his vanquished enemies from afar. David Kessler's fall had been spectacular in public. Federal prosecutors had built an airtight case against him, combining financial crimes with evidence of his connection to the attack on Abigail. He now awaited trial from federal detention center, his bail denied due to flight risk, a decision influenced by anonymous tips about offshore accounts and prepared escape plans that Bryce had strategically leaked to the prosecution. The Lancasters had retreated to a modest property in North Carolina, all that remained of their once vast holdings after Bryce's financial onslaught. Harold's health had deteriorated rapidly following their downfall, the stress of financial ruin and social humiliation proving too much for a man who had defined himself by wealth and status for 7 decades. Lena remained in Europe, drifting between cheap apartments in secondary cities, surviving on the meager allowance Bryce permitted her through a complex trust arrangement that gave her just enough to subsist, but never enough to mount any kind of comeback. Her attempts to contact Mia through intermediaries had been systematically blocked, each potential messenger warned about the consequences of facilitating any communication. Bryce's company was thriving, having secured a series of lucrative government contracts that positioned Donovan Security Systems as the premier provider in its field. The brief uncertainty caused by the attempted hostile takeover had been smoothly managed, with loyal board members rewarded and the few who had wavered kept in line through a combination of incentives and subtle reminders of Bryce's long memory. Abigail had recovered fully from the attack, moving into a guest house on Bryce's estate where he could ensure her safety while respecting her independence. Their relationship, always close despite the turmoil of their childhood, had strengthened through the shared trauma, with Abigail becoming a surrogate mother figure to Mia. On a clear April morning, Bryce sat in his home office reviewing quarterly projections when his private line rang, a line known to only 5 people in the world. "Donovan," he answered briskly. "It's Vincent. We have a situation. Kessler is dead." Bryce froze, his mind immediately calculating implications. "Ow! Officially suicide. Found hanged in his cell this morning." But given the security protocols for high-profile detainees, it wasn't suicide, Bryce concluded. They both knew that a man like Kessler, facing serious charges but with significant resources still hidden, would be more likely to attempt escape than to take his own life. "My sources say there was a visitor yesterday. Not on the official log. A woman. Ice formed in Bryce's veins. Description: dark hair, mid-40s, expensive clothes. Used credentials identifying her as part of Kessler's legal team, but the firm has no record of sending anyone. Lena." The name felt like acid on his tongue. "But how?" "She's in Europe. We track her movements." "Not anymore, we don't." Vincent's voice was grim. "She disappeared from our surveillance 3 weeks ago. We assumed it was a technical issue with the European networks, but now—" "Find her," Bryce ordered. "Whatever resources you need. I want to know where she is, who she's been in contact with, and what she's planning." After ending the call, Bryce sat motionless, his mind processing this unexpected development. Kessler's death wasn't a random event or a simple suicide. It was a message. Lena was eliminating loose ends, ensuring that Kessler couldn't implicate her further or potentially cut a deal with prosecutors at her expense. But why now? What had changed to make her take such a risk after months of apparent capitulation? The answer came later that day, in the form of a plain envelope delivered to his home by courier. Inside was a single photograph. Mia on the playground at her private school, clearly taken with a telephoto lens from outside the property. On the back, written in Lena's distinctive hand, were 3 words, "Not over yet." Cold fury washed over Bryce, but he controlled it, channeling it into focused action rather than blind rage. Within hours, he had doubled Mia's security detail, initiated a complete review of the school's security protocols, and moved Abigail to a secure location as a precaution. "She's irrational," Vincent observed during their emergency meeting that evening. "Taking these risks after you've effectively neutralized her, it doesn't make strategic sense." "It makes perfect sense if you understand Lena," Bryce replied, pacing his office. "She never accepted defeat. She was just regrouping. And she's not acting from strategy now, but from vengeance. She wants me to feel what she felt, powerless, vulnerable, afraid for someone I love. What about your daughter? Do we need more direct protection measures? Bryce considered the options. Pulling Mia from school and restricting her activities would protect her physically, but harm her emotionally. Lena was counting on him to overreact, to disrupt Mia's life in ways that would paradoxically give Lena an opening to position herself as the reasonable parent. No, we maintain normal routines, but with enhanced security. Mia doesn't need to know anything about this. As far as she's concerned, nothing has changed. Over the next 2 weeks, Bryce maintained his outward calm while orchestrating a global search for Lena. Her trail was surprisingly difficult to follow. She had clearly planned her disappearance meticulously, using resources and connections that had somehow escaped Bryce's initial purge. Then came the second message, a package delivered to Donovan's Security Systems headquarters, addressed to Bryce personally. Inside was a thumb drive and a note. Watch and learn. After having the drive thoroughly scanned for malware, Bryce plugged it into a secure, isolated computer. The video showed Harold Lancaster in what appeared to be a hospital room, looking frail and diminished. Off camera, Lena's voice was clearly audible. "Tell him, Dad. Tell him exactly what I told you to say." Harold's eyes, once sharp with arrogance, now reflected only defeat and fear. "Bryce, my daughter wants you to know that she hasn't forgotten what you did to our family. She wants you to know that she's coming for what's hers. Mia, the company, everything. And she won't stop until she has it all." The camera moved to include Lena in the frame, her face transformed by hatred and determination. "You taught me well, Bryce. You showed me what it means to be ruthless. Now I'm going to show you what it means to lose everything you love, piece by piece." The video ended with Lena smiling directly into the camera, a smile devoid of warmth or humanity. Bryce sat back, oddly calm. The Lena he had married, the woman who had hidden her true nature behind a facade of elegance and culture, was gone completely. This new Lena, raw, vengeful, unbound by social constraints, was actually easier to predict and counter. "She's coming back to the U.S., he told Vincent after showing him the video. "She's going to make a direct play for Mia, probably through the courts. She'll have fabricated evidence, new allies, maybe even witnesses willing to testify that I'm an unfit parent. Can she actually win custody after everything that's happened? Not legally, no. The custody agreement is ironclad. But that's not her goal, at least not through legal means. She wants to create chaos, to force me to divide my attention between protecting Mia and defending my company. She's setting up multiple fronts of attack." Vincent nodded grimly. "What's our counter?" "We go on offense," Bryce replied, his decision made. "Lena thinks she's learned how to play my game, but she's forgotten one crucial detail. I created the game, and I'm about to change the rules." Over the following days, Bryce implemented what he called Protocol Chimera, a multi-layered defensive and offensive strategy designed to neutralize threats while simultaneously springing a trap for Lena when she inevitably surfaced. First, he moved Mia and Abigail to his heavily secured lake house, ostensibly for a spring vacation, but actually to place them beyond Lena's immediate reach. Next, he initiated a preemptive legal strategy, having his attorneys file motions documenting Lena's threatening communications and seeking restraining orders that would make any approach to Mia or the company legally actionable. Most critically, he began feeding strategic misinformation through channels he knew would reach Lena. Apparent vulnerabilities in his security, fictional board meetings where crucial decisions would be made, fake custody hearings that would require Mia's presence. Each piece of false information was designed to shape Lena's choices, to draw her toward targets of Bryce's, choosing rather than allowing her to select her own. "She'll come herself," Bryce predicted during a secure call with Vincent. "She won't trust proxies for the endgame, not after what happened with Kessler. And when she does, we'll be waiting." The trap was baited with a seemingly perfect opportunity. Information suggesting that Bryce will be transferring Mia from the lake house to a new secure location on a specific date via private helicopter. The flight plan, security details, and timetable were all allowed to leak through channels Lena was known to be monitoring. On the appointed day, Bryce and Vincent waited at the designated landing zone, surrounded by a security team disguised as groundskeepers and maintenance personnel. The helicopter landed on schedule, but instead of Mia and her security detail, it contained only a pilot in a sealed case. "She's not taking the bait," Vincent observed, scanning the perimeter for any sign of movement. "No, she is. Just not in the way we expected." Bryce's instincts were screaming warnings. This isn't about intercepting Mia during transit. It's about... His phone rang, an unknown number. With a gesture to Vincent to trace the call, he answered. "Did you really think I'd fall for such an obvious trap, Bryce?" Lena's voice was almost playful. "You're slipping. Where are you, Lena?" "Close enough to see you right now, in fact. But that's not why I'm calling. I'm calling to let you know that I've just filed emergency custody papers alleging physical and emotional abuse. The hearing is tomorrow morning. I have witnesses, evidence, even medical reports. It's quite compelling." Bryce's mind raced. It was a desperate move, easily disproven, but it would require his attention and resources to fight. "You're wasting your time. No judge will." "Maybe not," Lena interrupted. "But fighting it will keep you busy enough that you might not notice what else is happening. Did you know that your board is meeting right now? An emergency session called by Crawford. Yes, the same Crawford you thought you'd neutralized. Turns out he's been quietly buying shares for months through fronts I helped establish." The pieces clicked into place. Lena hadn't been planning a direct assault. She'd been orchestrating a coordinated attack on multiple fronts, forcing Bryce to divide his attention and resources. "You're still underestimating me, Lena." Bryce's voice remained steady. "Crawford isn't buying anything. He's been working for me the entire time, feeding you exactly what I wanted you to hear. Your secret channels have been compromised from the beginning." There was a momentary silence on the line. "You're lying. Check your sources. Call your allies. See who answers." Bryce allowed himself a small smile. "You've been playing a game that was rigged from the start, and now it's checkmate." A click signaled the end of the call. Vincent looked up from his tablet. "We've got our location. Hotel downtown, 9th floor. Team is moving in now." But Bryce shook his head. "She's already gone. That call was pre-recorded, designed to keep us focused on the wrong target." He dialed a new number. "Maxwell, initiate Protocol Omega immediately." Full spectrum. Protocol Omega was Bryce's final contingency, a complete lockdown of all his assets, properties, and digital systems, coupled with the release of damning information about Lena to law enforcement agencies worldwide. It was the corporate equivalent of a scorched earth policy designed to eliminate any possible avenue of attack while simultaneously making Lena a priority target for international authorities. By nightfall, reports confirmed what Bryce had already sensed. Lena had vanished again, but not before attempting to access accounts and properties that had been secured hours earlier. Her custody filing had been dismissed by a judge familiar with the case history, and the emergency board meeting had never been more than a fiction designed to distract him. "She'll be back," Vincent warned as they reviewed the day's events. "She's too invested in revenge to simply walk away now." "I'm counting on it," Bryce replied. "But next time, it won't be on her terms. And it will be the last time." As he returned to the lake house, Bryce found Mia and Abigail playing board games in the great room, oblivious to the day's tensions and machinations. Watching his daughter laugh, secure in the belief that her world was safe and stable, Bryce renewed his silent vow to protect her at any cost. Lena had made her move and failed. Now it was his turn to bring this deadly game to its conclusion, once and for all. Chapter 8. The Final Gambit. Over the next month, an uneasy quiet settled over Bryce's world. Lena had vanished completely, leaving no digital footprint or financial transactions that could be traced. The custody petition had been permanently dismissed, Kessler's death ruled a suicide despite lingering questions, and the Lancasters retreated further into obscurity after Harold suffered a debilitating stroke. To the outside world, it appeared that the storm had passed. Bryce gradually relaxed some of the extraordinary security measures, allowing Mia to return to school and resuming a semblance of normal life. But privately, he knew better. Lena's silence wasn't surrender, it was preparation. "She's planning something bigger," he told Vincent during one of their regular security briefings. Something that will hit us where we least expect it. Every vulnerability has been addressed, Vincent assured him. Personnel, digital systems, physical locations, all secured and monitored. Even your sister's new apartment has security that would make most embassy compounds look porous. It's not enough. Bryce stared out his office window at the sprawling Virginia countryside. We're still reacting, defending. We need to force her hand, bring her into the open on our terms. The opportunity came unexpectedly through Abigail. During her weekly therapy session, part of her ongoing recovery program, she mentioned a strange interaction at her regular coffee shop. A woman sat next to me, asked if I was Abigail Donovan. She recounted to Bryce that evening. When I said yes, she just smiled and said, "Your sister-in-law sends her regards." Then she left a business card and walked out. The card bore the name of a small art gallery in Georgetown, the kind of place that catered to wealthy collectors seeking privacy rather than publicity. The address meant nothing to Bryce, but the timing and approach were unmistakable. Lena was making contact, establishing a channel of communication outside their normal surveillance perimeter. It's a trap, Vincent argued when Bryce explained his plan to visit the gallery. She's trying to lure you out, get you somewhere predictable. Of course it's a trap, Bryce agreed, but it's also an opportunity. She's getting impatient, making mistakes. This gallery, approaching Abigail directly, she's taking risks she wouldn't have considered a month ago. Against Vincent's strong objections, Bryce decided to spring the trap, but with substantial modifications to whatever Lena might be expecting. He would visit the gallery, but not on the day or time that would seem most logical. He would bring security, but not in the obvious formations that would be anticipated. And most importantly, he would wear specialized contact lenses developed by his company's R&D division. Lenses that contained microscopic cameras capable of recording everything he saw. 2 days later, Bryce entered the gallery shortly after opening, when foot traffic would be minimal. The space was elegant but intimate, displaying a carefully curated selection of contemporary works with price tags that ensured an exclusive clientele. A slender woman with a precise bob and designer glasses approached him. "Mr. Donovan, I presume? My name is Elise Renard. I understand you received my invitation." "Not directly," Bryce replied, studying her. This wasn't Lena, but there was something familiar in her mannerisms. A mutual acquaintance passed it along. "Yes, your sister. A lovely woman." Elise gestured toward a door at the rear of the gallery. "We have a private collection I believe will interest you. This way, please." The private viewing room was softly lit, with a single painting displayed on the far wall. As Bryce approached it, he recognized the style immediately, a distinctive abstract technique favored by an artist Lena had championed in her gallery years ago. "New work by Anton Morova," Elise confirmed. "Quite valuable, as his recent death has only enhanced his market position." Bryce studied the painting, noting the aggressive brushstrokes and violent color palette. The title card read simply, "Betrayal." "Subtle," he remarked dryly. "Art rarely is in its truest form." The voice came from behind him, a voice he knew intimately despite not having heard it in months. Bryce turned slowly to face Lena, who had entered silently through a concealed door. She looked different, harder, leaner, her once elegant appearance now sharp-edged and predatory. Her hair was cut short, dyed a darker shade than her natural color, and she carried herself with a new intensity. "Hello, Lena. You've gone to a lot of trouble for this meeting. Worth every penny to see you in person." She moved into the room, keeping a calculated distance between them. "You look well. Success continues to agree with you. What do you want?" Bryce kept his tone businesslike, though his senses were on high alert. The room had only 2 visible exits, and he was certain both were being monitored. "Want?" Such a simple word for such complex desires. Lena circled the perimeter of the room, never turning her back to him. "Revenge is too small a word for what I've been planning, Bryce. You didn't just take my life, you erased it. My family, my reputation, my daughter. You left me with nothing. You did that to yourself when you conspired with Kessler to take everything from me." Lena laughed, a brittle sound devoid of humor. "Is that what you tell yourself?" That I deserve what happened because I made the first move? How convenient for your conscience. I don't lose sleep over protecting what's mine. Bryce watched her carefully, aware that this conversation was merely prelude. Why am I here, Lena? You didn't arrange all this just to reminisce. No. She stopped her pacing, fixing him with a gaze that burned with focused hatred. I arranged this to give you a choice. From her jacket pocket, she produced a small remote control with a single button. This gallery has been specially prepared for our meeting. The sprinkler system has been modified to disperse a particularly unpleasant compound, one that causes temporary but complete paralysis within seconds of exposure. The doors are electronically locked. Your security team outside can't get in without a code only I possess. Bryce maintained his calm exterior, though his mind raced through potential scenarios and escape routes. Impressive setup. What's the choice you're offering? Simple. You sign over custody of Mia to me. Full legal and physical custody, with supervised visitation for you. You transfer controlling interest in Donovan Security Systems to a holding company that I designate. And you issue a public statement taking responsibility for fabricating evidence against David Kessler, leading to his wrongful prosecution and subsequent suicide. And if I refuse, then I press this button. You spend the next 6 to 8 hours completely paralyzed, and I implement my alternative plan, which involves certain individuals already positioned near your sister and daughter. Lena's smile was terrible in its certainty. I learned from you, Bryce. I learned that true power comes from being willing to do what your opponent thinks you won't. Bryce considered his options. The contact lenses were recording everything, providing evidence of Lena's threats and illegal modifications to the building. Vincent knew exactly where he was and would breach the gallery the moment communication was lost. But Abigail and Mia, if Lena truly had people positioned near them. You're bluffing, he said finally. You've become good at this game, Lena, but not that good. I've had Mia and Abigail under constant surveillance since your little message through the coffee shop. There's no one near them that I don't know about. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Lena's face, quickly suppressed. You think I'd come this far just to bluff? I think you're desperate. I think you've spent months planning this confrontation, building it up in your mind as your moment of triumph. Bryce took a deliberate step toward her. But you've made a critical mistake. Stay back, she warned, finger hovering over the button. Your mistake was thinking I'd walk in here without a contingency plan of my own. Bryce lifted his hand, revealing a small electronic device. Dead man's switch. If my vital signs change dramatically, say from being exposed to a paralytic agent, it triggers an immediate response. Everything I have on you, Kessler, your parents, every criminal conspiracy, every illegally obtained fund, every shred of evidence gets sent to federal authorities, media outlets, and select members of our former social circle. Simultaneously, Lena's eyes narrowed. You're lying. Maybe. Are you willing to bet whatever future you imagine on that assumption? He took another step forward. Here's my counteroffer. You leave the country permanently. I'll establish a trust fund that provides you with a comfortable living stipend, conditional on your maintaining at least 5,000 miles of distance between yourself and any member of my family. You sign comprehensive non-disclosure and non-contact agreements. In exchange, I don't pursue criminal charges for your role in Kessler's financial crimes, the attack on Abigail, or this current attempt at extortion. Why would I agree to that when I hold the advantage here? Because I'm not bluffing about the dead man's switch. Because Vincent and a tactical team are already surrounding this building. And because deep down, you know this ends only one way if you press that button, and it's not with you winning. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the room, predators assessing, calculating, looking for weakness. Then Lena laughed again, this time with a hint of genuine amusement. Always 3 steps ahead, aren't you, Bryce? Even when I think I've outmaneuvered you. It's not personal, Lena. It's just who I am. Despite his words, they both knew it was deeply personal. Had been from the moment she betrayed him. She lowered the remote slowly. How do I know you'll honor this arrangement? That once I'm out of the country, you won't simply cut off the funds and leave me with nothing again. Because unlike you, I keep my word when it's given. Bryce's voice hardened. And because if you ever come near my family again, there won't be any negotiation. No clever games, no second chances. Just consequences. The tension in the room was palpable as Lena considered her options. Finally, she placed the remote on a nearby table and stepped away from it. You'll have the papers drawn up? They already are. Maxwell will contact you tomorrow with the details. Bryce maintained his position, unwilling to turn his back on her until the immediate threat was neutralized. The gallery and Elise? Legitimate. Actually, Anton Morova was a friend who owed me a favor. Elise knows nothing beyond that I wanted a private meeting with a potential buyer. Lena's smile was thin. I'm not quite the monster you think I am, Bryce. No, you're exactly the monster I discovered you to be. He moved toward the main door, keeping her in his sight. It ends here, Lena, one way or another. As he reached the door, she called after him. You know what the real tragedy is? In another life, with different choices, we could have been formidable together instead of against each other. Bryce paused, hand on the door handle. There was never going to be another life, Lena. We are who we are. I'm just better at it than you. Outside, Vincent was waiting with a tactical team positioned discreetly around the perimeter. All good. For now. Bryce removed the contact lenses, handing them to Vincent. Get this footage to Maxwell immediately and verify the security status on Abigail and Mia. Already confirmed. Both secure. No unusual activity. Bryce nodded, relieved but not surprised. Have the jet ready for tomorrow. I want the custody papers and financial arrangements completed before nightfall. You think she'll honor the agreement? I think she knows what will happen if she doesn't. Bryce looked back at the gallery where Lena stood watching from the window, and I think, finally, she believes me. The following day, Lena signed the comprehensive legal documents Maxwell had prepared, formally relinquishing any claim to Mia, Donovan Security Systems, or any other aspect of Bryce's life. Within hours, she was on a commercial flight to Sydney, the first step in what would become a permanent exile. 3 days later, as Bryce reviewed the final security reports confirming Lena's arrival in Australia, Abigail joined him in his office. Is it really over? She asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. With Lena? Yes. Bryce closed the file with finality. She's defeated and she knows it. Her pride won't let her make another attempt that might fail. And the Lancasters? Harold had another stroke yesterday. He's not expected to recover. Patricia is selling their remaining properties and moving to assisted living in Florida. Bryce's tone held no satisfaction, merely factual detachment. They're no longer relevant. Abigail studied her brother, noting the lines of exhaustion etched around his eyes. What about you, Bryce? Is this victory? Does it feel like you thought it would? Bryce considered the question seriously. It's not about victory. It never was. It was about protection. Of Mia, of you, of what I've built. He looked out the window, where Mia could be seen playing in the garden with her nanny. They threatened everything that matters to me. I responded accordingly. The ruthlessness that Dad taught us, do you ever worry that it comes at a cost? That it changes us? Every day. Bryce's admission surprised them both with its honesty. But I'd rather pay that cost than see Mia pay the price of my weakness. Abigail nodded, understanding. They had both been shaped by their father's harsh lessons about power and vulnerability, about the necessity of decisive action when threatened. Where she had rebelled against those lessons through self-destruction, Bryce had internalized them, becoming the ultimate expression of their father's philosophy. What will you tell Mia when she's older and asks about her mother? The truth, appropriate to her age. That Lena made choices that made it impossible for us to be a family. That sometimes people we love aren't what they seem. Bryce's expression softened as he watched his daughter, and that no matter what, she is loved and protected. As evening fell, Bryce sat alone on the terrace, nursing a glass of bourbon and reflecting on the events of the past year. The conspiracy against him had been neutralized, the conspirators scattered or destroyed. Mia was safe, his company secure, his enemies vanquished. Yet there was no sense of triumph, no exultation in the outcome. Only the quiet certainty that he had done what was necessary, what his nature demanded. The world remained as his father had described it, divided into predators and prey, and Bryce had ensured that he and those he loved would never be the latter. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new potential threats to guard against. But tonight, in this moment of hard-won peace, Bryce Donovan allowed himself to simply be a father watching over his sleeping child, the most fundamental and primal form of protection there was. The hunt was over. The predator had won, and the price, paid in trust, in mercy, in the capacity for forgiveness, was one he would willingly pay again to keep Mia safe in a world that had proven itself as dangerous and unforgiving as his father had always warned. Chapter 9. Blood and Ashes. 3 years passed, the seasons cycling through renewal and decay as Bryce rebuilt his world with methodical precision. Donovan's security systems had expanded globally, securing contracts with governments and corporations across 6 continents. Mia, now 9, thrived in school and extracurricular activities, showing the same sharp intelligence and determination that characterized her father. Lena remained in Australia, living a modest but comfortable life on the stipend from the trust Bryce had established. Occasional surveillance reports confirmed she had made no attempts to contact Mia or interfere in Bryce's affairs, seemingly resigned to her exile and diminished circumstances. Harold Lancaster had died 18 months after his second stroke, with Patricia following 6 months later, her health having deteriorated rapidly after her husband's passing. Their remaining assets had been liquidated to cover outstanding debts, leaving nothing for potential heirs. The scars of betrayal had faded, but not disappeared entirely. Bryce maintained his vigilance, never fully trusting, always evaluating potential threats with cold precision. But he had found a new equilibrium, a life centered around Mia's well-being and the continued growth of his company. On a crisp autumn morning, Bryce sat in his home office reviewing acquisition proposals when his secure line rang. Vincent's direct number. "We have a situation," Vincent said without preamble. "There's been a breach at the Montana property, the hunting lodge." Bryce hadn't visited the Lancaster family property since the fateful weekend when Mia had revealed Lena's midnight burial. After the Lancasters' financial collapse, Bryce had quietly acquired the property through a shell company, maintaining minimal security there since it held no strategic value beyond unpleasant memories. What kind of breach? Local security firm detected unauthorized entry last night. 2 individuals, possibly 3. They spent approximately 40 minutes on the property, focusing their activity around a specific area. The oak tree with the swing, Bryce said immediately, the pieces clicking into place. "Correct. How did you know?" "Because that's where it started." "What did they take?" "Unknown. By the time security responded, they were gone. Camera footage shows a vehicle, but no clear images of the individuals. I've dispatched a team to investigate. ETA 3 hours. Bryce's mind raced through possibilities. Check Lena's whereabouts. Immediately. 20 minutes later, Vincent called back. She's gone. Hasn't been seen at her Sydney apartment in over a week. No credit card activity, no cell phone pings. She's coming back, Bryce said, certainty hardening in his gut. Whatever was buried there, she needs it. It wasn't just fabricated evidence against me. There was something else, something she's desperate enough to risk everything to retrieve. I'll escalate security protocols for you and Mia. And Abigail. No. Bryce's decision was immediate. We maintain normal operations, normal visibility. If Lena's watching, I want her to think we haven't detected the breach yet. This time, we let her come to us. Over the next 72 hours, Bryce orchestrated a carefully choreographed appearance of normality while mobilizing his resources behind the scenes. Security was enhanced, but made deliberately invisible. Surveillance systems were amplified, but disguised. Every approach to his home, office, and Mia's school was monitored through multiple redundant systems. On the 4th day, Vincent reported that the investigation team at the Montana property had found evidence of excavation around the oak tree, a hole approximately 3 feet deep, now empty. Whatever was there, they have it now, Vincent concluded. And now they'll make their move, Bryce replied. Increase surveillance on all transportation hubs within a 500-mile radius of our location. Focus on private airfields, charter services, high-end car rentals. Lena won't risk commercial travel now that she's violated the agreement. That evening, as Bryce helped Mia with her homework, his personal phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. A photograph of the metal lockbox he had reburied 3 years ago, now open to reveal its contents. Not the fabricated evidence he had found before, but something else entirely. Documents, photographs, what appeared to be a small recording device. A second text followed. Did you really think this was about money or the company? It was always about justice. Check your email. In his private email account, Bryce found a message with multiple attachments, scanned documents that made his blood run cold. Police reports, medical examinations, photographs of injuries, all concerning a woman named Catherine Mercer. Vincent Mercer. Catherine must be related, sister, wife, daughter. The documents detailed allegations of domestic abuse, stalking, and attempted murder dating back 15 years. A restraining order that had been granted but mysteriously vacated 2 weeks later. Hospital records documenting multiple injuries consistent with severe physical assault. And most damning of all, emails between Vincent and Bryce discussing how to handle the Catherine situation and ensure it never becomes public. Emails Bryce had never written or sent, but which had been expertly fabricated to appear genuine. A final attachment was a video file. With growing dread, Bryce opened it to see Lena sitting in what appeared to be a hotel room, looking directly into the camera. "By now you've seen the evidence," she began, her voice steady. "Vincent Mercer is not the loyal lieutenant you believe him to be. He's a monster who nearly killed his wife 15 years ago, then used his military connections to bury the evidence and intimidate her into silence. When Catherine finally found the courage to approach me last year, seeking help to expose him, I knew I'd found the key to understanding you, Bryce." Lena leaned closer to the camera. "You didn't build your empire alone. Vincent has been there from the beginning, handling your problems, eliminating obstacles, doing the dirty work while you kept your hands clean. Did you never wonder about his methods? Did you never question why people who oppose you sometimes simply disappeared from the playing field?" She held up a flash drive. "Everything is here. The original police reports, Catherine's testimony, evidence of Vincent's other victims, and evidence of your knowledge and complicity, which I've already duplicated and placed in secure locations with instructions for release if anything happens to me." Bryce's mind raced, evaluating this new information against years of experience with Vincent. There had been situations that resolved surprisingly in his favor, competitors who backed down unexpectedly, potential whistleblowers who suddenly recanted. He had never questioned Vincent's methods, focusing only on results. "I'm not interested in reconciliation or custody or your company anymore," Lena continued on screen. "I want justice for Catherine and the others. Vincent Mercer belongs in prison, and you need to understand that your empire is built on blood. You have 48 hours to turn Vincent over to the authorities with a full confession, or everything goes public, to law enforcement, to the media, to your government clients. Mia will grow up knowing exactly who her father is and what he permitted in his name." The video ended, leaving Bryce in stunned silence. For the first time in years, he felt the ground shifting beneath him, certainties crumbling. His secure line rang, Vincent's direct number. "We've got a hit on the surveillance net," Vincent reported, oblivious to Bryce's new knowledge. "Private charter arrived at Millwood Airfield 2 hours ago. Facial recognition picked up Lena and 2 unidentified individuals at a hotel 20 miles from here. Do we have eyes on the hotel?" Bryce kept his voice neutral, years of negotiation experience allowing him to mask the tumult of his thoughts. "Team in position, monitoring all exits. Orders." It was the moment of decision. If what Lena claimed was true, Vincent Mercer was not just an employee, but a violent criminal who had been acting as Bryce's enforcer, crossing lines Bryce had deliberately avoided exploring. If false, it was Lena's most sophisticated attempt yet to drive a wedge between Bryce and his most trusted ally. "Hold position. No engagement. I need to review some information first." Bryce ended the call before Vincent could question the unusual instruction. Over the next 6 hours, Bryce conducted his own investigation, using resources and contacts unknown to Vincent. What he discovered confirmed the worst. Catherine Mercer had indeed filed multiple police reports against her then-husband Vincent. Medical records documented escalating injuries over a 3-year period. And most damning, Catherine had vanished entirely from public records shortly after the restraining order was mysteriously vacated. No credit history, no employment records, no social media presence. As if she had ceased to exist. By dawn, Bryce had made his decision. He contacted Maxwell Brighton, instructing him to prepare documents detailing everything he had discovered about Vincent, with copies to be sent to specific law enforcement contacts in the event certain conditions were triggered. Then he called Vincent. "I need to meet. Alone. The boathouse at the estate, 1 hour. Something wrong, boss?" Vincent's voice held a note of concern, or perhaps wariness. "Just a development we need to discuss privately." 1 hour. Bryce ended the call, his mind clear and focused despite the lack of sleep. The boathouse at the edge of Bryce's estate offered privacy and security, and strategic advantages Bryce had considered carefully. As he waited, he reviewed everything he knew about Vincent Mercer, former military intelligence, expert in problem-solving, fiercely loyal to Bryce for reasons that had never been fully explained. A man who operated in shadows by design, who maintained no social media presence, who lived in a fortress-like compound when not working directly with Bryce. A man who might very well be a sociopath hiding behind a mask of professional competence. Vincent arrived precisely on time, alone as instructed. He entered the boathouse cautiously, eyes scanning the surroundings before focusing on Bryce. "What's the situation?" he asked, maintaining a careful distance. "Catherine Mercer." Bryce watched Vincent's face closely as he spoke the name. It happened in a microsecond, a tightening around the eyes, a slight tensing of the shoulders, quickly suppressed, but unmistakable to someone trained to notice micro-expressions as Bryce was. "Who?" Vincent's voice remained level, his face returning to professional neutrality. "Your wife. The one you nearly beat to death 15 years ago. The one who disappeared after filing a restraining order against you." Bryce remained seated, hands visible on the arms of his chair. "The one Lena found." Vincent's expression shifted, calculation replacing confusion. "Lena contacted you. She sent evidence. Extensive evidence. About Catherine, about other problems you've handled for me over the years. Problems that were resolved more permanently than I had authorized. And you believe her?" There was a dangerous edge to Vincent's voice now. "After everything she's done, I believe the hospital records, the police reports, the fact that Catherine Mercer vanished completely 15 years ago." Bryce maintained eye contact. "What I want to know is, did you think I'd never find out? Or did you just not care because you thought I'd protect you regardless?" Vincent's posture changed subtly, weight shifting to the balls of his feet. "You've always known who I am, Bryce. What I'm capable of. You just preferred not to ask certain questions. There's a difference between being ruthless in business and being a murderer. Is there? Where exactly is that line for you?" Vincent's smile was cold. "When Harold Lancaster had his first stroke after you destroyed his company, was that business or murder? When Kessler hung himself in his cell after you made sure he had no future, business or murder? You've always wanted the results without the moral responsibility for how they're achieved." The accusation struck uncomfortably close to truth. Bryce had maintained a deliberate distance from Vincent's methods, focusing only on outcomes. "Catherine is alive," Vincent said unexpectedly. "Relocated, new identity, substantial financial settlement. How many things, Bryce, but not what Lena is suggesting." "Prove it. I can arrange a video call. It will take time, 24 hours minimum. She lives overseas now." Bryce studied Vincent, trying to determine if this was truth or a desperate play for time. "And the other problems you've handled? The ones that went beyond what I authorized. Sometimes situations require more permanent solutions than you're comfortable acknowledging. I've protected you, and by extension, Mia, from threats you never even knew existed." Vincent's expression hardened. What exactly is your plan here, Bryce? Turn me over to authorities based on evidence from the woman who tried to destroy you? Evidence that's 15 years old and largely circumstantial. It was the central question. If Vincent was telling the truth about Catherine being alive, Lena's leverage was significantly weakened. But if he was lying, here's what's going to happen, Bryce said finally. You're going to be placed on administrative leave effective immediately. All your access codes, security clearances, and operational authorities will be suspended pending a complete investigation. If what you're saying about Catherine is true, we'll determine next steps then. Vincent's laugh held no humor. That's not going to work for me, Bryce. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as Vincent's demeanor shifted completely, the professional mask falling away to reveal something colder and more predatory. You think this is a negotiation? That you can just remove me from the equation after everything I've done for you? Vincent moved closer, his right hand drifting toward his jacket. Don't. Bryce's voice was steel. Security teams are monitoring this conversation. One wrong move, and they breach. No, they don't. Vincent's smile was terrible in its certainty. Because I control those teams. I've always controlled them. They're loyal to me first, you second. Why do you think I insisted on hiring and training all your personal security? It wasn't just about competence. The full implications crashed over Bryce like icy water. He had allowed Vincent to build a security apparatus around him that might very well be compromised at the highest levels. You're not as untouchable as you think, Bryce. Vincent's voice was almost gentle. No one is. Not you, not Mia, not Abigail. There are no perfect security systems. There are always vulnerabilities if you know where to look. The threat to Mia galvanized Bryce, rage burning through shock. If you ever come near my daughter, you'll what? Call the authorities I've spent years cultivating relationships with? Use security teams that answer to me? Face it, Bryce. You need me. You've always needed me. The only question is whether we continue as before or whether this unnecessary confrontation forces adjustments to our arrangement. In that moment, Bryce understood with perfect clarity what he was facing. Not just a trusted employee who had overstepped boundaries, but a sociopath who had been manipulating him for years, positioning himself as indispensable while building a power base within Bryce's own organization. I think we're done here. Bryce stood slowly. I'll need your resignation by end of day. Vincent's laugh was dismissive. That's not how this works. Here's what's actually going to happen. You're going to tell Lena that you've investigated her claims and found them baseless. You're going to maintain our current operational structure. And most importantly, you're going to remember that your continued success and your family's safety depends on my goodwill. As Vincent turned to leave, confident in his leverage, Bryce pressed a small button concealed in his watch, a signal that activated a protocol only he and Maxwell Brighton knew existed. Throughout the estate, specialized security systems came online, overriding normal protocols and implementing lockdown procedures designed specifically for the scenario Bryce had never wanted to contemplate: internal betrayal at the highest level. Vincent froze at the sound of multiple doors locking simultaneously throughout the boathouse. What did you do? Something I prepared for, but hoped I'd never need. Bryce's voice was steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Protocol Judas. Complete override of all security systems, communication blackout for anyone not on the approved list, and immediate deployment of a secondary security team that you don't control because you don't know they exist. The door to the boathouse opened to admit 4 men in tactical gear, none of whom Vincent recognized. They positioned themselves strategically around the room, weapons not drawn, but clearly ready if needed. You think I didn't consider the possibility that someone in my organization might become a threat? Bryce asked quietly. Even you? Especially you, Vincent. Because you were always the most dangerous person in my orbit precisely because I trusted you the most. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Vincent's face. This is a mistake, Bryce. Without me, without you, I'll rebuild. I've done it before. Bryce nodded to the tactical team. Mr. Mercer is being removed from the organization, effective immediately. Secure him. The team moved with practiced efficiency, restraining Vincent despite his resistance. The man's face contorted with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "This isn't over, Bryce," Vincent snarled. "You have no idea what I've done for you, what bodies I buried. When it all comes out." "It won't," Bryce interrupted coldly. "Because unlike you, I don't leave loose ends." As Vincent was escorted out, Bryce activated his secure phone, one that operated on systems Vincent had never had access to, and called Maxwell Brighton. "Implement purge protocol immediately. Full spectrum." The instruction initiated a comprehensive cleansing of Bryce's organization, identifying and removing anyone whose primary loyalty might be to Vincent rather than to Donovan's security systems. Within hours, 14 employees across various divisions had been escorted from company properties. Systems were being audited, access codes changed, security protocols rewritten from the ground up. The vulnerability had been severe, but the response was proportional, swift, thorough, and merciless. As evening fell, Bryce received confirmation that Vincent was being held in a secure location pending transfer to federal authorities. The evidence Maxwell had compiled, not just about Catherine Mercer, but about numerous other solutions Vincent had implemented over the years, was comprehensive enough to ensure he would never be a threat again. With that threat contained, Bryce turned his attention to Lena. She had served a purpose, bringing Vincent's betrayal to light, but she remained a liability that needed to be addressed. Using the hotel location Vincent's team had identified before his removal, Bryce had his new security chief, Roman Torres, a former Delta Force operator with impeccable credentials, establish surveillance on Lena and her companions. Rather than confronting her directly, Bryce sent a simple text message. "The problem has been addressed. We should talk. Same gallery, tomorrow noon." The following day, Bryce arrived at the art gallery to find Lena waiting alone in the private viewing room, her posture tense but determined. "Vincent," she asked without preamble, "in federal custody by now. The evidence you provided, supplemented by what my own investigation uncovered, was conclusive." Bryce studied her, noting the changes 3 years had wrought. She was harder, more focused, but there was something else, a clarity of purpose that hadn't been there before. "Catherine Mercer, is she with you?" Lena nodded. "And her sister. They've been searching for evidence against Vincent for years. When Catherine approached me in Australia, I saw an opportunity to do something meaningful with what was left of my life. This wasn't about revenge against me. Not primarily, no." Lena's mouth curved in a humorless smile. "Though I won't pretend, I didn't enjoy watching you realize that your most trusted ally was a monster. There's a certain poetic justice there." Bryce absorbed this, reevaluating his understanding of the situation. "What happens now?" "Catherine testifies. Vincent goes to prison for a very long time. The other families whose lives he destroyed get closure." Lena's expression hardened. "And you face the consequences of employing a sociopath as your enforcer for 15 years. "I didn't know," Bryce said quietly. "You didn't want to know," Lena corrected. "There's a difference. You built an empire using Vincent as your weapon, never questioning his methods, as long as you got results. That makes you complicit, Bryce." The accusation hit its mark, forcing Bryce to confront uncomfortable truths about the choices he had made and the willful blindness he had maintained regarding Vincent's activities. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Justice for Catherine and the others. A substantial financial settlement for Vincent's victims. And your public acknowledgement of responsibility for the actions taken in your name." Lena's gaze was unflinching. "In return, the evidence suggesting your direct knowledge of Vincent's crimes stays buried." "Blackmail, Lena? After everything." "Justice, Bryce. After everything." She stood, gathering her coat. "You have 48 hours to decide. After that, Catherine goes public with everything, including the fabricated emails that implicate you directly. Your choice." As she moved to leave, Bryce called after her. "And Mia? Is she part of this negotiation too?" Lena paused at the door. "No. Whatever happened between us, I won't use her as leverage. She deserves better than either of us, frankly." Her expression softened momentarily. "Is she happy?" "Yes," Bryce answered honestly. "She's thriving." "Good." For a moment, Lena looked like she might say more, but instead she simply nodded and walked out. Back at his estate, Bryce convened an emergency meeting with his legal team, outlining the situation and the choices before him. The consensus was clear. Fighting the allegations would be costly, protracted, and damaging regardless of the outcome. The appearance of complicity, even if legally defensible, would devastate the company's government contracts and public standing. We recommend settlement and a carefully worded statement acknowledging organizational responsibility without admitting personal knowledge, Maxwell advised. It's the cleanest exit from a very messy situation. Bryce listened to their counsel, weighing options and potential outcomes with the same cold precision he applied to all business decisions. By morning, he had reached his decision. The settlement was substantial. $50 million distributed among identified victims of Vincent's activities, structured through a third-party foundation to insulate Bryce from direct involvement. The public statement acknowledged systematic failures of oversight within Donovan security systems and a commitment to comprehensive reform of operational protocols. Vincent Mercer, facing multiple federal charges and with his former employer distancing itself publicly, had no leverage to negotiate. His arrest and the subsequent investigation became a minor media sensation, with Catherine Mercer's testimony providing a compelling narrative of survival and persistence in the face of powerful opposition. Bryce himself remained largely insulated from the worst of the fallout. The company weathered the storm, its government contracts secure through aggressive lobbying and strategic leadership changes. The press coverage, while intensive initially, gradually subsided as newer scandals captured public attention. 3 months later, with the immediate crisis managed and the company stabilizing under new security leadership, Bryce received an unexpected package at his home. Inside was a single photograph of Mia as a toddler with Lena, taken during happier times. On the back, in Lena's handwriting, some debts can never be repaid, some bridges never rebuilt, but perhaps some fires can finally be allowed to burn out. There was no return address, no further message. Searches revealed that Lena, Catherine Mercer, and her sister had disappeared from public view, presumably to start new lives away from the shadows of their past traumas. That evening, as Bryce sat with Mia, helping her with a science project, he found himself studying his daughter's features, recognizing echoes of Lena in her smile, her determination, the tilt of her head when concentrating. "Daddy, are you listening?" Mia asked, noticing his distraction. "Always pumpkin." Bryce refocused on her explanation of photosynthesis, pushing thoughts of the past aside. Later, after tucking Mia in, he retreated to his study where Abigail was waiting with 2 glasses of bourbon. "To survival," she toasted, handing him one. "To rebuilding," he responded, clinking his glass against hers. They sat in companionable silence for a while, before Abigail spoke again. "Do you ever wonder if Dad was right? About the world being divided into predators and prey?" Bryce considered the question, remembering his father's harsh lessons, delivered with fists and belts as often as with words. "I think he was right about the division, wrong about what makes someone a predator or prey." Meaning Vincent was unquestionably a predator, but his violence made him vulnerable in the end. Lena tried to be the predator and became prey, then found a different kind of strength. And we, he gestured between them, survived because we adapted, not because we're naturally stronger or more ruthless. Survival of the most adaptable rather than the strongest, Abigail mused. Darwin would approve. Maybe. Bryce sipped his bourbon, contemplating the future that stretched before them. "All I know for certain is that I'll do whatever it takes to ensure Mia never faces the choices we did. That she never has to decide between being predator or prey. And if she's betrayed as we were," Abigail asked softly, "will you teach her to never forgive, never forget?" The question struck at the heart of what had defined Bryce's life. His absolute refusal to forgive betrayal, his relentless pursuit of those who crossed him. Looking toward Mia's room, he felt a momentary doubt. Was that truly the legacy he wanted to leave her? "I'll teach her to protect herself," he said finally. "To recognize threats before they materialize. To build something no one can take from her." He smiled faintly. The rest she'll have to figure out for herself. The conversation drifted to lighter topics, but Bryce's mind continued to circle back to the fundamental questions raised by the events of the past 3 years. He had survived multiple betrayals, eliminated threats from every direction, rebuilt what had been damaged. The cost had been high, trust shattered, relationships destroyed, a kind of innocence lost forever. Yet looking at Mia's science project spread across the dining room table, at Abigail laughing about some childhood memory, at the empire he had created and defended, Bryce felt no regrets. The world remained as his father had described it, dangerous, unforgiving to the weak, rewarding to the strong. He had navigated it according to those rules and emerged victorious. If that victory came with certain compromises, ethical, emotional, spiritual, there were prices he had paid knowingly. Prices he would pay again to protect what mattered most. As the years passed, Bryce Donovan continued to build his legacy, expanding his company into new territories, nurturing Mia's growth into a confident young woman, maintaining his vigilance against potential threats. The lessons of the past remained with him always. Trust sparingly, verify relentlessly, protect fiercely, and above all, never forgive those who betray you. Lena remained a ghost, neither seen nor heard from again. The Lancasters faded into obscurity, their name eventually forgotten in the social circles they had once dominated. Vincent Mercer died in prison 5 years into his sentence, officially from a heart attack, though rumors suggested involvement from other inmates with connections to families he had harmed. And the hunting lodge in Montana, where it had all begun with a child's innocent observation, was eventually demolished, the property reforested and returned to wilderness, erasing the physical reminder of betrayal just as Bryce had erased its perpetrators from his life. The metal box that had started it all, with its damning contents that had nearly destroyed multiple lives, was preserved in Bryce's private vault. A reminder of vulnerabilities overcome, of battles won, of the constant vigilance required to protect what mattered in a world filled with those who would take it if given the chance. Alone in his study late one night, years after the events that had tested him so severely, Bryce raised a glass to the darkness beyond his window, not in celebration or in mourning, but in acknowledgement of the fundamental truth that had guided his life. In the end, each person stands alone with the choices they have made and the consequences they have created. For Bryce Donovan, those choices had been clear, those consequences accepted. He had protected his own at any cost. He had refused to forgive betrayal in any form. And he had emerged not just surviving, but triumphant, the ultimate predator in a world that respected nothing less. It was, he reflected as he finished his bourbon, exactly as his father had promised it would be. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. Harvey Ingram stood in his spotless kitchen, methodically cleaning the cast iron skillet he'd used to prepare dinner. Everything in their suburban Chicago home had its place, just like Harvey preferred. At 42, he'd built a successful career as a forensic accountant, a profession that demanded precision and an eye for details others missed. His methodical nature had served him well, both professionally and personally. "Dad, dinner was amazing," 12-year-old Emma said, wrapping her thin arms around his waist from behind. Harvey smiled, setting down the skillet to ruffle her dark hair, the same shade as his own. "Just wait until you see what I'm making for your birthday next week," Harvey replied, turning to face his daughter. He frowned slightly, noticing how pale she looked. Emma had always been delicate, but lately she seemed even more fragile. "I can't wait." Emma beamed, though Harvey noticed she was gripping the counter for support. From the living room came the sound of Belinda's laughter, bright, musical, and perfectly timed for whoever she was video chatting with. Harvey's wife of 15 years had a gift for presentation. Everything about Belinda Ingram appeared flawless. Her honey blonde hair never seemed out of place. Her makeup was always perfect, and she had an uncanny ability to present their family as the picture of suburban success. Harvey had met Belinda during his graduate studies. She'd been working at a medical clinic then, charming patients and doctors alike with her warm bedside manner. He'd been instantly drawn to her nurturing nature, especially after growing up with emotionally distant parents. When Emma was born, Belinda had transformed into what Harvey believed was the perfect mother, attentive, caring, and deeply invested in their daughter's well-being. Mom's telling her book club about Emma's latest doctor's appointment. Emma said, her voice carrying a note of resignation that seemed too mature for her age. Harvey's brow furrowed. Emma had been to the doctor frequently over the past 2 years. Stomach issues, fatigue, mysterious illnesses that would come and go. Belinda was always the first to notice Emma's symptoms, always the one pushing for more tests, more consultations with specialists. "How are you feeling tonight, sweetheart?" Harvey asked, kneeling down to Emma's level. "A little tired, but okay," Emma replied, though her smile seemed forced. From the living room, Belinda's voice carried over. "Oh yes, Emma's been such a brave little fighter. The doctors are still running tests, but you know how much I worry about her. A mother's intuition." Harvey had heard this speech dozens of times. Belinda's book club, her gym friends, their neighbors, everyone knew about Emma's health struggles and Belinda's dedication as a mother. The way Belinda told it, she was a saint caring for a chronically ill child while Harvey worked long hours, leaving her to handle the medical crisis alone. "Why don't you go get ready for bed?" Harvey suggested. "I'll come read with you in a few minutes." As Emma headed upstairs, Harvey noticed her stumble slightly. His protective instincts flared, but he pushed down the worry. Belinda had everything under control with the doctors. She'd been handling Emma's care with the same meticulous attention she brought to everything else. Later that evening, as Harvey reviewed case files in his home office, he heard Belinda on the phone with her sister Patty McGraw. "I just don't know what else to do," Belinda was saying, her voice carrying the perfect note of maternal anguish. "The poor thing is getting worse, and Harvey, well, you know how men are. He thinks I'm being overprotective, but a mother knows." Harvey paused, his pen hovering over a financial discrepancy he'd been tracking. Was he being dismissive? He'd always trusted Belinda's judgment when it came to Emma's care. Medical issues weren't his expertise, numbers were. And Belinda had always been so knowledgeable, so proactive about their daughter's health. "I've been doing so much research," Belinda continued. "There are these new treatments, but they're expensive. Harvey's always worried about money, but what price can you put on your child's life?" Harvey set down his pen. They weren't struggling financially. His forensic accounting firm was thriving. But Belinda was right to prioritize Emma's health over his natural caution about spending. As he prepared for bed, Harvey found himself studying his reflection in the bathroom mirror. At 6'2" with broad shoulders and graying temples, he cut an imposing figure. His colleagues often commented on his intensity, the way his dark eyes could dissect a lie or expose hidden truths in financial records. But when it came to his family, especially Emma's illness, he felt helpless. "You're brooding again," Belinda said, entering the bathroom in her silk nightgown. Even after 15 years of marriage, she remained strikingly beautiful. "Just thinking about Emma," Harvey replied. "Maybe we should get another opinion. Try a different specialist." "I've already scheduled an appointment with Dr. Chambers at Children's Memorial," Belinda said, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "See? I told you I have everything handled." Harvey nodded, allowing himself to lean into his wife's embrace. Belinda had always been the emotional center of their family, while he provided stability and security. It was a partnership that had worked for over a decade. But as he drifted off to sleep that night, Harvey couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Not just with Emma's health, though that was certainly troubling, but with something deeper. Perhaps it was his forensic instincts, honed by years of uncovering financial deceptions. But there was a pattern here that he couldn't quite identify. The next morning brought another typical scene. Belinda fussing over Emma's breakfast while their daughter pushed food around her plate, claiming her stomach hurt. Harvey watched from behind his coffee cup as Belinda, took Emma's temperature, felt her forehead, and made concerned noises. "I think we should keep her home from school today," Belinda announced. "She doesn't look well at all." Emma's face fell. "But Dad, you promised to help with my science project tonight. We can work on it this weekend if you're feeling better," Harvey said, though he noticed Emma seemed more disappointed than relieved about missing school. As Harvey left for work, he kissed Emma's forehead and was struck by how clammy her skin felt. The worry gnawed at him throughout the morning as he reviewed financial records for a corporate fraud case. By afternoon, his unease had transformed into something sharper, a recognition pattern that his analytical mind couldn't ignore. The realization hit him during a meeting with a client whose business partner had been systematically stealing from their company. The partner had been clever, taking small amounts over time, always having plausible explanations for discrepancies. The pattern of deception was subtle but consistent, just like Emma's mysterious symptoms that always seemed to occur when Harvey wasn't home. Harvey excused himself from the meeting and drove home early, his mind racing with possibilities he didn't want to consider. Chapter 2. The Unthinkable. Harvey pulled into his driveway 2 hours earlier than usual, his stomach churning with a mixture of worry and something darker, suspicion. As a forensic accountant, he learned to trust his instincts when patterns emerged that didn't make sense. Emma's illness followed a pattern that was beginning to feel less like random medical misfortune and more like something else. He entered through the front door and immediately heard retching from upstairs. Taking the steps 2 at a time, Harvey found Emma in the upstairs bathroom, doubled over the toilet. What he saw made his blood run cold. She was vomiting blood. "Emma." He rushed to her side, holding her hair back as she continued to retch. Her small body was shaking, and her breathing came in short, panicked gasps. I can't breathe," Emma whispered between heaves. Harvey's protective instincts exploded into action. He scooped Emma into his arms, her body feeling frighteningly light, and called for Belinda as he rushed down the stairs. "We need to go to the hospital now," he shouted. Belinda emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. When she saw Emma in Harvey's arms, covered in blood, her reaction struck Harvey as odd. There was surprise, yes, but also something else, calculation. "She's doing this for attention. Stop overreacting," Belinda sighed, her tone more annoyed than concerned. "You know how dramatic she gets when you come home early. She probably bit her tongue or something." Harvey stared at his wife in disbelief. Their daughter was vomiting blood and struggling to breathe, and Belinda's response was dismissive irritation. "Are you insane?" Harvey snapped, pushing past her toward the garage. "Look at her." "Harvey, you're being ridiculous. If we run to the ER every time Emma has a little episode." "A little episode?" Harvey's voice rose to a roar. "She's vomiting blood, Belinda." Without waiting for a response, Harvey strapped Emma into the back seat of his car and peeled out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, he saw Belinda standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, wearing an expression of mild annoyance rather than panic. The drive to Chicago Memorial Hospital took 12 minutes, the longest 12 minutes of Harvey's life. Emma drifted in and out of consciousness, her breathing shallow and rapid. Harvey spoke to her continuously, keeping her awake, promising her everything would be okay. In the emergency room, the staff took one look at Emma and immediately whisked her into a trauma bay. Harvey provided what medical history he could, though he realized with growing alarm how little he actually knew about Emma's recent treatments. Belinda had always handled the medical appointments, claiming Harvey was too busy with work. Dr. Salvatore Chambers, a tall, thin man in his 50s, took charge of Emma's case. As Harvey watched through the glass partition, medical staff worked quickly, drawing blood, inserting in 4, running tests he didn't understand. "Mr. Ingram?" Dr. Chambers approached, his expression grave. "We need to ask you some questions about your daughter's recent medical history." "Of course. My wife usually handles. She should be here soon." "What medications has Emma been taking?" Harvey felt a chill of inadequacy. My wife manages all of that. Belinda knows Emma's medical details better than I do." Dr. Chambers nodded, making notes. "When did these symptoms first appear?" "About 2 years ago. She started having stomach issues, fatigue. It's been getting progressively worse." And who has been managing her care during this time? My wife, Belinda. She's very knowledgeable about medical things. She used to work in a clinic. Dr. Chambers' expression shifted slightly. I see. And you haven't been involved in the medical appointments. Harvey felt defensive. I work long hours. Belinda insisted she could handle it, and she's always been so thorough. 20 minutes later, Belinda arrived, perfectly composed despite the emergency. Her hair was styled, her makeup touched up, and she carried a small purse that looked more suited for a social event than a medical crisis. When Dr. Chambers saw her walk in, something extraordinary happened. The color drained from his face, and his hand immediately went to the phone. Security, Harvey heard him say urgently. I need security to room 7 immediately. And call the police. Call the cops now. Harvey froze on the spot, his mind struggling to process what was happening. Doctor, what's going on? But Dr. Chambers was already moving toward Belinda, his face a mask of recognition and barely controlled fury. Belinda Alvarado, he said, using a name Harvey had never heard before. Or should I say, Belinda McGraw? Or perhaps Belinda Chun. You've used so many names over the years. Belinda's perfect composure cracked for just an instant before reassembling itself. I'm sorry, doctor, but I think you have me confused with someone else. I'm Belinda Ingram. No confusion at all, Dr. Chambers replied coldly. I remember you very clearly from my residency in Philadelphia 8 years ago. You were a concerned mother then too, weren't you? Bringing your sick child to the ER repeatedly. What was that little boy's name? Tyler? Tommy. Harvey felt the world tilt around him. What are you talking about? Security guards appeared in the doorway just as Dr. Chambers continued his devastating revelation. Mrs. Ingram, or whatever your real name is, your daughter is suffering from chronic poisoning. Someone has been systematically administering small doses of several substances over an extended period. The blood work shows traces of ipecac syrup, which would cause the vomiting, and small amounts of prescription sedatives that would explain her fatigue and breathing problems. The room seemed to spin around Harvey. Poisoning? That's impossible. Who would? The words died in his throat as understanding crashed over him like a physical blow. Munchausen syndrome by proxy, Dr. Chambers explained, his eyes never leaving Belinda. A psychological disorder where a caregiver deliberately makes someone in their care sick to gain attention and sympathy. Your wife has been slowly poisoning your daughter. Harvey's legs nearly gave out. He grabbed the doorframe for support, his forensic mind automatically cataloging the evidence that had been right in front of him all along. Emma's symptoms that only appeared when he wasn't home, Belinda's extensive medical knowledge, her constant need for sympathy and attention as the devoted mother, her dismissive reaction to Emma's emergency tonight. That's ridiculous, Belinda said, her voice rising. Harvey, don't listen to this. This man is clearly unstable. I would never hurt Emma. But her protest rang hollow in Harvey's ears. He was remembering other things now. How Belinda always insisted on preparing Emma's meals. How she discouraged Harvey from attending medical appointments. How she always seemed to have a ready supply of the specific medications Emma needed. You sick bitch, Harvey whispered, the words torn from his throat like broken glass. The security guards moved to flank Belinda as police sirens wailed in the distance. Dr. Chambers placed a gentle hand on Harvey's shoulder. Your daughter is going to be okay, Mr. Ingram. We caught this in time. With proper treatment and the removal of the toxins from her system, she should make a full recovery. Harvey sank into a chair, his body shaking with a mixture of relief and rage so intense it threatened to consume him. Emma would live. But the woman he'd loved and trusted for 15 years, the woman he believed was the perfect mother, had been slowly killing their daughter for attention. As the police led Belinda away in handcuffs, she turned to Harvey one last time. You'll never understand, she said, her mask finally dropping completely to reveal something cold and calculating underneath. The power, the sympathy, the way everyone looked at me as the perfect mother sacrificing everything for her sick child. You could never give me that kind of attention. Watching his wife, the stranger who wore his wife's face, being taken away, Harvey felt something fundamental shift inside him. The methodical, control man was still there, but underneath, a darker force was awakening. Belinda had stolen 2 years of his daughter's childhood, had nearly killed her for the sake of twisted psychological gratification. The legal system would handle her prosecution, but Harvey was beginning to realize that justice and revenge were two very different things. Chapter 3. Pieces of the Past. 3 days after Belinda's arrest, Harvey sat in his home office surrounded by documents that painted a picture of deception so elaborate it took his breath away. Emma was recovering in the hospital, her body slowly purging the toxins that had kept her sick for nearly 2 years. The doctors assured him she would make a full recovery, but the psychological scars would take longer to heal. Detective Rick Prince, a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes and the demeanor of someone who'd seen too much, sat across from Harvey's desk. Between them lay evidence bags containing pill bottles, syringes, and medical records that told a story of systematic child abuse. "Your wife is a professional," Detective Prince said grimly. "This isn't her first time." Harvey looked up from the forged medical documents he'd been examining. "What do you mean?" "We've been in contact with law enforcement in Philadelphia, Phoenix, and Denver. She's operated under at least 4 different identities over the past 15 years. Always the same pattern. Marry a financially stable man, have or adopt a child, then begin the systematic poisoning while presenting herself as the devoted mother of a sick child." The words hit Harvey like physical blows. "Other children?" "3 that we know of. 1 died, a little boy named Timothy Chun in Phoenix. The medical examiner ruled it natural causes at the time, but now..." Detective Prince shook his head. "The other 2 survived when their fathers became suspicious and left her, taking the children. But it took them years to figure out what was happening." Harvey felt sick. "How did I miss this? I'm supposed to be good at spotting deception. You were looking at financial records, not medical ones. And she's exceptionally skilled at manipulation. Look at this." Detective Prince pulled out a thick folder. "She's been documenting everything: Emma's symptoms, her own sacrifice and dedication as a mother, even your supposed neglect as a father too focused on work." Harvey opened the folder and found page after page of meticulous notes written in Belinda's neat handwriting. Reading them was like viewing his life through a funhouse mirror, recognizable but distorted beyond recognition. Harvey came home late again tonight. Doesn't seem to care that Emma had another episode. I sat with her for 3 hours while he worked in his office. Sometimes I wonder if he even loves her. Emma responded well to the new treatment plan. Dr. Martinez says I'm one of the most dedicated mothers he's ever worked with. It's nice to have someone understand what I'm going through. Harvey questioned the medical bills today. I wish he wouldn't make me feel guilty for trying to save our daughter's life. Jesus, Harvey whispered. She was building a case against me. More than that, Detective Prince said. We found evidence that she was planning to leave you soon. She's been in contact with a divorce attorney, claiming spousal neglect and medical abandonment of your daughter. With Emma's medical history and her documentation of your supposed indifference, she would have gotten custody and significant alimony. Harvey's hands clenched into fists. The scope of Belinda's manipulation was staggering. She hadn't just been abusing Emma for attention. She'd been systematically destroying his relationship with his daughter while positioning herself as the victim and hero of their family story. There's more, Detective Prince continued. We found communications between your wife and someone named D. Minor. Ring any bells? Harvey shook his head. D. Minor runs a blog called Warrior Moms. It's a support group for mothers of chronically ill children. Your wife has been a featured contributor for the past year, sharing Emma's journey and her own struggles as a devoted mother. The blog has over 50,000 subscribers, and your wife has received substantial donations through the site. Donations? Harvey felt his analytical mind engaging, finding patterns in the chaos. Over $30,000 in the past year. Small amounts from hundreds of people who were moved by Emma's story and wanted to help with medical expenses. Money that went into an account you never knew about. Harvey stood up abruptly, needing to move to process this information. Belinda hadn't just been abusing Emma for psychological gratification. She'd been monetizing their daughter's suffering. What happens now, he asked. She'll be charged with aggravated child abuse, fraud, and in Timothy Chen's case, potentially murder. But the legal process will take months, maybe years. And given her history of manipulation, she'll probably present herself as the victim of a vindictive husband and overzealous law enforcement. Harvey walked to his window, looking out at the yard where Emma used to play before she became too sick. His daughter would recover physically, but the trauma of discovering that her mother had been poisoning her would require years of therapy. The woman he'd loved and trusted had stolen his daughter's childhood and nearly destroyed both their lives for money and attention. "There's something else you should know," Detective Prince said quietly. "Your wife's real name appears to be Belinda McGraw. She has a sister named Patty who may have been aware of the abuse." Harvey turned sharply. "Patty?" They talked on the phone regularly. "We're investigating her involvement." Phone records show she received several payments from Belinda over the past year, and some of the donations to the Warrior Moms blog can be traced back to her. The conspiracy was larger than Harvey had imagined. It wasn't just Belinda. She'd had help, encouragement, possibly even guidance from her sister. That evening, Harvey sat in Emma's hospital room watching his daughter sleep. The color was already returning to her cheeks as her body healed from years of systematic poisoning. But when she was awake, she asked questions Harvey didn't know how to answer. "Why did Mom want to hurt me, Dad? Was I really sick, or was it all pretend? Are you going to leave me too?" Each question broke Harvey's heart a little more. Emma's trust had been shattered, not just in her mother, but in the fundamental safety that children should feel with their parents. Dr. Chambers stopped by during his evening rounds. "How are you holding up, Mr. Ingram?" "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed," Harvey admitted. The way she insisted on handling all of Emma's care, how she discouraged me from getting too involved with the medical stuff. She made me feel like I was being a typical negligent father by trusting her expertise. Perpetrators of Munchausen by proxy are often extremely skilled manipulators, Dr. Chambers said. They isolate their victims from other adults who might notice inconsistencies. Your wife systematically excluded you from Emma's medical care, while simultaneously making you feel guilty for not being more involved. It's a classic pattern. How do I help Emma get through this? Time, therapy, and the knowledge that she's safe now. Children are remarkably resilient when they feel secure and loved. After Dr. Chambers left, Harvey sat alone with his sleeping daughter and made a decision that would have surprised his colleagues. Harvey Ingram had built his career on working within the system, using legal and ethical means to expose wrongdoing. But the system had failed to protect his daughter. The legal process would be slow, and there was no guarantee that Belinda would receive the punishment she deserved. For the first time in his adult life, Harvey began considering justice that existed outside the boundaries of law. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Your wife is a saint. You don't deserve her or your daughter. Hope you're proud of destroying your family." Harvey stared at the message, his jaw clenching. The online community that Belinda had cultivated still believed her version of events. To them, he was the villain who had turned against a devoted mother. Even now, from jail, Belinda was manipulating the narrative. A second message followed. "Belinda has friends. People who care about her. You better watch yourself." Harvey screenshot both messages and forwarded them to Detective Prince. Then he sat back in his chair and began planning. His forensic mind, trained to uncover hidden truths and expose elaborate deceptions, turned toward a new purpose. Belinda McGraw had spent years crafting her perfect victim persona, building an online following, and systematically destroying his family. The legal system would prosecute her for the crimes, but Harvey was going to make sure the world knew exactly who she really was. And if her friends wanted to make threats, Harvey would show them what happened when you threatened his daughter. The methodical accountant was still there, but underneath, something harder and more dangerous was taking shape. Emma would recover, and Belinda would pay, not just in court, but in every way that mattered. Chapter 4. The Hunt Begins. 2 weeks after Belinda's arrest, Harvey had transformed his home office into a war room. Emma was finally home from the hospital, slowly gaining strength and color, but requiring round-the-clock monitoring to ensure no lasting effects from the poisoning. Harvey had taken extended leave from his firm, telling his partners only that he needed to focus on his daughter's recovery. The truth was more complex. Harvey had discovered that justice and revenge were indeed different things, and he was methodically planning both. The threatening messages had escalated. His home address, Emma's school information, and even photos of his house had been posted on several Warrior Moms forums with captions suggesting he was an abusive father who had framed his innocent wife. Belinda's online supporters had become a virtual mob, and Harvey realized that even behind bars, his wife was still manipulating the narrative. Detective Prince arrived that morning with updates and new concerns. Belinda made bail, he announced grimly. Her sister Patty McGraw posted the $500,000 bond. Harvey felt his blood chill. How is that possible? She tried to kill Emma. Her lawyer argued that she was a pillar of the community with no flight risk, and the judge bought it. There are restrictions. She can't contact you or Emma, can't leave the state, and she has to surrender her passport. But she's out. Where's she staying? With her sister on the north side. We have her under surveillance, but Harvey... Detective Prince's expression grew grave. There's something else. We've been monitoring her communications, and she's been in contact with several people who seem very invested in proving her innocence. Harvey leaned forward. The online supporters? More than that. She's been coordinating with them, providing her version of events, painting herself as the victim of an elaborate frame-up by a controlling husband. Some of these people have resources, money, connections, technical skills. Harvey's forensic instincts sharpened. You think they're planning something? I think your wife has built herself a small army of people who believe her story completely. And some of them seem willing to go to extraordinary lengths to help her. That afternoon, while Emma napped, Harvey began his own investigation. Using skills honed by years of financial investigation, he started mapping Belinda's network of supporters. What he found was more sophisticated than he'd expected. The Warrior Moms community wasn't just a support group. It was a complex organization with significant resources. D. Minor, the blog's founder, had been using the site to raise funds not just for medical expenses, but to fight injustice against mothers who were wrongfully accused of harming their children. Harvey discovered that Belinda wasn't the first victimized mother the group had supported. Digging deeper, Harvey found connections to other cases. Mothers who had been accused of Munchausen by proxy but had avoided conviction due to insufficient evidence or prosecutorial overreach. In several cases, key witnesses had recanted their testimony or evidence had mysteriously disappeared. His phone rang. The caller ID showed Emma's school. Mr. Ingram, this is Principal Sims. There's been an incident. Harvey's heart raced. Is Emma okay? She's fine, but someone tried to access the school's database this morning, attempting to obtain Emma's records and your contact information. Our IT department traced it to several different IP addresses, but the intrusion was sophisticated. Harvey's hands clenched. I'll be right there. At the school, Principal Preston Sims, a stern but caring man in his 60s, showed Harvey the security footage from that morning. We also had a woman claiming to be his social worker asking about Emma's attendance and academic performance. Principal Sims explained. When we asked for credentials, she became evasive and left quickly. Description: tall, blonde, probably in her 40s. Professional appearance, but something felt off about her. Harvey studied the grainy footage. The woman wasn't Belinda, but there was something familiar about her bearing, her mannerisms. We've increased security around Emma's classroom, Principal Sims continued. But Mr. Ingram, I have to ask, should we be concerned about your daughter's safety? Harvey made a decision that went against every instinct he'd developed over years of careful, methodical behavior. Yes, and I need to know immediately if anyone else comes asking about Emma or our family. That evening, Harvey hired Ian Blackwell, a former police detective who now worked as a private investigator. Ian was a compact, intense man with the kind of quiet competence that Harvey recognized in himself. Your wife has definitely been busy, Ian reported after his initial assessment. The Warrior Moms organization has connections to several law firms that specialize in defending parents accused of child abuse. They've also got a network of sympathetic medical professionals who provide alternative interpretations of evidence. Alternative interpretations? Doctors willing to testify that symptoms of poisoning could actually be rare genetic disorders, immune deficiencies, or psychosomatic responses to family stress. They create reasonable doubt where none should exist. Harvey felt sick. How many children have suffered because of this? More than you want to know. The good news is that your wife made a mistake with Emma. Dr. Chambers recognized her from a previous case, and the physical evidence is overwhelming. But she's not going down without a fight, and she's got resources you didn't know about. Ian handed Harvey a file folder. Bank records for your wife's hidden accounts. She's been receiving money from the Warrior Moms Network for over a year. Not just donations, payments. She was being compensated for sharing Emma's story and for recruiting other victimized mothers to the cause. Harvey opened the folder and felt his world shift again. The deposits totaled over $100,000, far more than Detective Prince had mentioned. Belinda hadn't just been abusing Emma for attention and small donations. She'd been part of a larger organization that profited from child abuse by creating a network of professional victims. There's more, Ian continued. We traced some of the payments to a corporation called Maternal Advocacy Solutions. Officially, they provide legal support and counseling for mothers dealing with the family court system. Unofficially, they seem to specialize in helping women escape consequences for child abuse by claiming they're victims of wrongful prosecution. Who runs this organization? A woman named Dr. Louise Dalton. She's a psychologist who's built her career on defending mothers accused of Munchausen by proxy. She claims the syndrome is a misogynistic invention used to persecute devoted mothers. Harvey studied Dr. Dalton's photo in the file. She was an elegant woman in her 50s with silver hair and the kind of authoritative bearing that would be convincing on a witness stand. Is she legitimate? That's where it gets interesting. She's got credentials, PhD in psychology, published research, expert witness in dozens of cases. But her methodology is questionable, and several of her former clients have been rearrested when their children ended up in the hospital again. That night, after Emma was asleep, Harvey sat in his office planning his next moves. The legal system was handling Belinda's prosecution, but this network of enablers would likely help her escape meaningful consequences. Even if she was convicted, she'd probably serve minimal time and emerge as a martyr to her cause. Harvey opened his laptop and began creating a detailed dossier on everyone connected to the Warrior Moms network. His forensic skills, typically used to trace financial fraud, were now focused on mapping a conspiracy that had enabled the abuse of children for profit. His phone buzzed with another threatening message. You think you won, but Belinda has more friends than you know. Watch your back. Harvey screenshot the message and added it to his growing file. Then he did something that would have surprised his colleagues. He began planning how to systematically destroy every person who had enabled his wife's abuse of Emma. The methodical accountant was still there, organizing evidence and building cases. But underneath, something darker was taking control. These people had profited from his daughter's suffering and were now threatening his family. Harvey Ingram was about to show them what happened when someone threatened his child. Chapter 5. The Web Unravels. Harvey's investigation had been running for 3 weeks when he made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden in Belinda's encrypted communications with the Warrior Moms network, he found evidence that the conspiracy was far more extensive than anyone had realized. Emma was thriving now, gaining weight and energy as the toxins left her system. She'd started seeing a therapist, Dr. Teresa Stevenson, who specialized in helping children recover from abuse. But Emma's healing couldn't begin fully until she felt safe, and as long as Belinda's network remained active, that safety was an illusion. Ian Blackwell arrived at Harvey's house with a grim expression and a thick file folder. We have a problem, Ian announced. Belinda's lawyer, Wayne Greer, isn't just defending her, he's part of the network. We traced payments from Maternal Advocacy Solutions to his firm totaling over $300,000 in the past 2 years. Harvey studied the financial records Ian presented. Wayne Greer was a prominent family law attorney with an impressive reputation for defending mothers in custody battles. What the public didn't know was that many of his clients were women who had been accused of abusing their children. How does the scam work? Harvey asked. They identify mothers who are desperate, usually facing loss of custody due to suspected abuse. Dr. Louise Dalton provides psychological evaluations claiming the mothers are victims of false accusations. Greer handles the legal defense, often negotiating plea deals that involve no jail time and supervised visitation. The Warrior Moms Network provides financial support and online advocacy. And the mothers who don't actually deserve help get mixed in with the ones who do. Exactly. It's brilliant in a sick way. They hide guilty clients among a handful of genuinely wrongfully accused mothers, making it nearly impossible to challenge the network without appearing to attack legitimate victims. Harvey felt his anger crystallizing into something colder and more focused. What about Dr. Dalton? Is she a true believer or a knowing participant? That's where it gets interesting. Ian opened another folder. Dr. Dalton lost custody of her own children 15 years ago when her ex-husband proved she had been lying about their son's medical condition. The boy had been hospitalized repeatedly for symptoms that disappeared whenever he stayed with his father. Harvey looked up sharply. She's projecting her own guilt onto the system? More than that, she's built an entire career on the premise that Munchausen by proxy is a patriarchal conspiracy to silence devoted mothers. But the psychological profiles we've compiled suggest she genuinely believes her own narrative. She's convinced herself that she was wrongfully persecuted, and now she's saving other mothers from the same fate. The scope of the deception was staggering. Dr. Dalton was simultaneously a victim of her own delusions and the architect of a system that enabled child abuse on a massive scale. How many children have been hurt because of this network? Ian's expression grew grave. We've identified at least 20 cases in the past 5 years where children suffered ongoing abuse because the network helped their mothers avoid prosecution. 3 children died. Harvey felt something break inside him. 3 children were dead because this network had helped their abusers escape justice. Emma had nearly become a 4th. What can we prove legally? That's the problem. Individually, each part of the network operates within legal boundaries. Dr. Dalton provides expert testimony, which is a right as a licensed psychologist. Greer defends his clients aggressively, which is his obligation as their attorney. The Warrior Moms provide financial and emotional support, which appears charitable. But together, it's a conspiracy to enable child abuse. But proving that in court would require testimony from victims who are either dead or too traumatized to speak, and evidence that's been carefully compartmentalized. That evening, Harvey sat in Emma's room as she slept, watching the rise and fall of her breathing. She was safe now, but how many other children were suffering while this network operated with impunity? His phone buzzed with a call from Detective Prince. "We have a situation," the detective said. "Belinda violated her bail conditions. She was caught near Emma's school this afternoon." Harvey's blood ran cold. What happened? She didn't approach the school directly, but she was parked across the street during dismissal time, photographing children as they left. When confronted by our surveillance team, she claimed she was visiting a friend in the neighborhood. What happens now? We're processing the warrant for her arrest, but her lawyer is already claiming this was an innocent misunderstanding. Given her network's resources, she'll probably make bail again within 48 hours. After hanging up, Harvey made a decision that would have horrified the man he'd been a month ago. The legal system was too slow, too vulnerable to manipulation by people with resources and connections. Emma would never be truly safe while Belinda's network remained intact. Harvey opened his laptop and began drafting a detailed expose of the entire conspiracy. But instead of sending it to law enforcement, he uploaded it to a secure server and began preparing to release it simultaneously to major news outlets, medical journals, and law enforcement agencies across multiple states. If the network operated through manipulation of public opinion and media narratives, Harvey would beat them at their own game. But his plan went beyond simple exposure. He was going to systematically destroy each member of the network using their own methods against them. Dr. Louise Dalton had built her career on discrediting legitimate medical professionals and legal proceedings. Harvey was going to expose the financial connections between her charitable work and the network of abusers she enabled. Wayne Greer had made millions defending child abusers by questioning the credibility of prosecutors and medical experts. Harvey was going to provide evidence showing how Greer had knowingly defended guilty clients while hiding behind attorney-client privilege. The Warrior Moms network had weaponized social media to attack anyone who challenged their narrative. Harvey was going to flood their platforms with evidence of their true nature, using their own online tactics against them. But the centerpiece of his plan was Belinda herself. She had spent years crafting a perfect victim persona, manipulating everyone around her through emotional manipulation and false narratives. Harvey was going to strip away that facade and show the world who she really was. His phone rang again. Emma's therapist, Dr. Stevenson. Mr. Ingram, I'm calling because Emma mentioned something during our session today that I think you should know about. Harvey felt his stomach drop. What is it? She said that her mother used to give her special medicine that would make her feel sick so that Mommy could take her to see the doctors. She said Mommy told her it was their special secret and that if she ever told anyone, Daddy would go away forever. Harvey gripped the phone so tightly he was afraid it might break. Even now, after everything that had been revealed, he was discovering new layers to Belinda's manipulation. She had terrorized Emma into silence by threatening to destroy her relationship with her father. Doctor, is Emma ready to talk to the police about this? With proper preparation and support, I believe she could provide testimony. But Mr. Ingram, I need you to know, Emma is also carrying significant guilt about her mother's arrest. She feels responsible for breaking their secret and getting her mother in trouble. Harvey closed his eyes, feeling the weight of what Belinda had done to their daughter's psyche. The physical healing was just the beginning. Emma would be dealing with the psychological trauma for years. What can I do to help her? Keep doing what you're doing. Be consistent, be truthful, and make sure she knows that none of this was her fault. Children need to feel safe before they can truly begin healing. After the call ended, Harvey looked at his laptop screen, where his expose of the network was taking shape. Justice through the legal system was important, but Emma's safety and healing were paramount. Harvey was going to make sure that Belinda and everyone who enabled her never had the opportunity to hurt another child. And if that required methods that existed outside the boundaries of legal procedure, so be it. The war for his daughter's life was about to begin in earnest. Chapter 6, The Perfect Trap. Harvey had spent 2 months carefully documenting the Warrior Moms network when opportunity presented itself in an unexpected form. Belinda had been released on bail again, despite violating her original conditions, thanks to Wayne Greer's legal maneuvering and Dr. Louise Dalton's expert testimony claiming that Belinda's presence near the school was a manifestation of separation anxiety rather than stalking behavior. But their arrogance had created an opening that Harvey's forensic mind immediately recognized. The network was planning a major publicity campaign to support Belinda's case. Dr. Dalton would be presenting her research on false allegations at a medical conference in Chicago. Wayne Greer had scheduled a press conference to announce a civil lawsuit against the hospital and Harvey for defamation and conspiracy. Most importantly, D. Minor was organizing a Justice for Belinda rally to be held outside the courthouse. They were gathering all their key players in one place at one time, convinced that their coordinated media strategy would shift public opinion in Belinda's favor. Harvey was going to use their own event to destroy them. Ian Blackwell arrived at Harvey's house with the final pieces of evidence needed for Harvey's plan. The financial records are damning, Ian reported. We can trace direct payments from Dr. Dalton's research foundation to at least 12 women who later had their children removed from their custody due to abuse. The payments always came after negative publicity about their cases, suggesting they were being compensated for their silence. Harvey studied the bank records. The pattern was clear. The network wasn't just enabling abuse. They were actively bribing victims to prevent them from exposing the system. What about Wayne Greer? Even better, we found communications between Greer and a pharmaceutical company that manufactures Ipecac syrup. Greer has been providing them with advance warning about upcoming Munchausen by proxy cases, allowing them to withdraw their products from certain markets to avoid liability. Harvey felt his anger crystallize into something colder and more focused. The corruption was even more extensive than he'd imagined. Pharmaceutical companies were profiting from foreknowledge of child abuse cases. And D. Minor? She's the key to everything. The Warrior Moms blog isn't just a support group. It's a recruitment tool. She identifies vulnerable mothers facing custody battles and introduces them to the network. We found evidence that she receives referral fees for every new client she brings to Greer's law firm. Harvey reviewed the complete dossier he'd compiled over the past months. Every member of the network, every financial connection, every child who had been hurt because of their conspiracy. The legal system had been too slow and too vulnerable to their manipulation, but Harvey had found a different path to justice. "Are you sure about this plan?" Ian asked quietly. "Once we set it in motion, there's no going back." Harvey looked at the photo of Emma on his desk, taken the previous week, showing her healthy and smiling for the first time in years. His daughter was healing, but she'd never be completely safe while this network remained operational. "I'm sure," Harvey said. The next morning, Harvey began executing the most complex investigation of his career. Using skills developed over years of forensic accounting, he created a series of false identities and online personas designed to infiltrate the Warrior Moms network from within. His first persona was Michael Sloan, a divorced father seeking custody of his son from an allegedly abusive mother. Harvey carefully crafted Michael's story to mirror cases the network had handled before, including financial documents showing he could afford their services. Within 48 hours, D. Minor had contacted Michael directly, offering support and connecting him with Wayne Greer's law firm. The consultation was scheduled for the same day as their planned rally. Harvey's second persona was Dr. Daniel Holt, a pediatrician concerned about false allegations of abuse in his practice. He reached out to Dr. Dalton's research foundation, expressing interest in her work and offering to collaborate on a study about prosecutorial overreach in medical settings. Dr. Dalton scheduled a meeting for the day of her medical conference presentation. The third persona was the most dangerous, Jennifer Walsh, a mother whose daughter had died after being repeatedly hospitalized for mysterious symptoms. Harvey created Jennifer's story carefully, suggesting that she believed her ex-husband had somehow caused their daughter's death and that the medical establishment had covered it up. This persona attracted immediate attention from the network's most radical members, including several who offered to help Jennifer get justice through methods that weren't strictly legal. As the rally date approached, Harvey had documented dozens of conversations revealing the true nature of the network. Members casually discussed coaching mothers to lie in court, intimidating witnesses, and even falsifying medical records. Most damaging of all, he had recorded Wayne Greer explicitly stating that some of his clients were probably guilty, but that proving innocence was less important than winning cases. 2 days before the rally, Harvey received the call he'd been expecting. "Michael, this is D. Minor. I wanted to let you know about a special event we're having this weekend. It's a rally to support one of our warrior mothers who's being persecuted by the system. I think you'd find it inspiring, and there will be opportunities to meet other fathers who face similar challenges." Harvey accepted the invitation, knowing that his presence at the rally would complete the trap he'd been setting for months. The night before the rally, Harvey sat with Emma as she did her homework at the kitchen table. She'd gained 15 pounds since leaving the hospital and was finally keeping up with her grade level academically. The therapist said her progress was remarkable, but Harvey knew the real test would come when the legal proceedings began and Emma had to confront what her mother had done to her. "Dad," Emma looked up from her math homework. "Are you okay? You seem worried about something." Harvey considered how much to tell her. Emma knew her mother was in trouble for making her sick, but she didn't understand the full scope of the conspiracy that had enabled the abuse. "I'm making sure that what happened to you never happens to another child," Harvey said carefully. "Tomorrow is going to be an important day." Emma nodded solemnly. "Will Mom be there?" "Yes." "Will she try to hurt me again?" Harvey knelt down beside his daughter's chair, looking directly into her eyes. "Emma, I promise you, your mother will never hurt you or any other child again. Tomorrow, everyone is going to learn the truth about what she did." The next morning, Harvey dressed carefully in the conservative suit he'd worn to court proceedings throughout his career. But underneath the familiar exterior, he was carrying recording equipment that would capture everything that happened at the rally. As he drove toward downtown Chicago, Harvey felt the familiar calm that came with executing a carefully planned investigation. Every piece was in position, every contingency accounted for. In a few hours, the Warrior Moms network would be destroyed by their own arrogance and Harvey's methodical preparation. The trap was set. All that remained was to spring it. Chapter 7. Justice Served. The Justice for Belinda rally was held in Federal Plaza on a crisp October morning. Harvey arrived early, positioning himself among the crowd of supporters who genuinely believed they were defending an innocent mother. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was surrounded by well-meaning people who had been manipulated into enabling child abuse. Belinda stood on a small platform, looking every inch the persecuted victim. She wore a conservative blue dress and minimal makeup, her hair pulled back in a style that suggested maternal suffering rather than vanity. To the crowd of supporters, she appeared fragile and noble, a devoted mother destroyed by a vindictive system. Harvey felt sick watching her performance, knowing that Emma was safe at school only because he'd arranged for extra security. Even now, Belinda was manipulating the narrative, presenting herself as the victim rather than the perpetrator. Dr. Louise Dalton spoke first, her authoritative voice carrying across the plaza as she denounced the patriarchal medical establishment that persecuted devoted mothers. She presented statistics about wrongful accusations and emotional testimony about the tragedy of families torn apart by false allegations. The crowd responded with applause and supportive chants. To them, Dr. Dalton was a champion of maternal rights, a voice of reason in a system biased against women. Harvey activated his recording equipment as Wayne Greer took the microphone. Belinda Ingram represents every mother who has ever been questioned about her devotion to her child, Greer declared. The charges against her are based on the discredited testimony of a doctor with a grudge and the manipulated evidence of a husband seeking revenge in a custody battle. More applause. Harvey noted how skillfully Greer was reframing the narrative, making Dr. Chambers appear biased and Harvey appear vindictive. When Belinda finally spoke, her performance was masterful. She thanked her supporters with tears in her eyes, spoke about the agony of being separated from her daughter, and described the nightmare of being accused of harming the child she'd sacrificed everything to save. Emma has always been my world, Belinda said, her voice breaking at just the right moment. Every doctor's appointment, every sleepless night, every moment of worry, I did it all out of love. To be accused of hurting her is beyond my comprehension. Harvey felt his jaw clench as Belinda described the elaborate medical care she'd provided for Emma, presenting her systematic poisoning as devoted maternal sacrifice. The crowd was completely captivated by her performance. It was time to spring the trap. Harvey pulled out his phone and sent a single text message to Detective Prince. Now, within minutes, federal agents began moving through the crowd. Harvey watched as Dr. Dalton was approached by two agents who quietly showed her their badges before escorting her away from the platform. Similar scenes played out throughout the plaza as other key network members were simultaneously arrested. The crowd began to murmur in confusion as Wayne Greer was handcuffed in the middle of his speech defending Belinda's innocence. D. Minor tried to flee but was stopped by agents who had been positioned at all exit points. But the real shock came when Detective Prince approached the platform with an arrest warrant for Belinda, not for the original charges of child abuse, but for conspiracy to commit fraud, racketeering, and accessory to murder in the death of Timothy Chen in Phoenix. As Belinda was led away in handcuffs for the second time, Harvey stepped forward and addressed the confused crowd through a portable loudspeaker he'd prepared for this moment. "My name is Harvey Ingram," he announced. "I'm the husband Belinda has been describing as vindictive and controlling. I'm also the father of Emma, the daughter she nearly killed through systematic poisoning." The crowd fell silent, uncertain how to process this development. For the past 3 months, I've been documenting a conspiracy that enabled the abuse of dozens of children. The people you came here to support today weren't defending innocent mothers. They were operating a criminal enterprise that profited from child abuse. Harvey activated a projector that displayed financial records on a large screen visible to the entire plaza. Dr. Louise Dalton received over $800,000 in the past 2 years for providing false expert testimony defending child abusers. Wayne Greer's law firm was paid over $2 million for legal services that helped abusive mothers avoid prosecution. The Warrior Moms Network collected donations, supposedly for medical expenses, but actually used the money to bribe witnesses and falsify evidence. The displayed documents showed payment records, email communications, and bank transfers that painted a clear picture of the conspiracy. Harvey watched as the crowd's support turned to confusion, then to anger as they realized they'd been manipulated. The woman you came here to support poisoned my daughter for nearly 2 years, documenting her suffering online to generate sympathy and donations. 3 children died because this network helped their abusers escape justice. My daughter nearly became the 4th. Harvey's voice grew stronger as he continued his methodical destruction of the network's narrative. Every one of you who donated money to support these warrior mothers unknowingly funded child abuse. Every time you shared their stories or defended them online, you helped silence their victims. The people you trusted to fight injustice were the ones perpetrating it. The impact was immediate and devastating. Supporters began leaving the plaza, many in tears as they realized they'd been unknowingly complicit in harming children. Others demanded to know how they could help expose the full scope of the conspiracy. Harvey's phone buzzed with notifications as news outlets began reporting the mass arrests and the evidence he'd simultaneously released to media contacts across the country. The story was breaking nationally, with headlines like "Child Abuse Network Exposed" and "Fake Charity Enabled Systematic Poisoning." But Harvey's revenge wasn't complete yet. As the plaza emptied and law enforcement finished processing arrests, Harvey drove to the offices of Maternal Advocacy Solutions. Using his Dr. Daniel Holt identity, he'd scheduled a meeting with Dr. Dalton that would never happen. She was now in federal custody. But Patty McGraw, Belinda's sister and co-conspirator, was at the office trying to destroy evidence. Harvey found her in Dr. Dalton's office, frantically shredding documents. "Looking for something?" Harvey asked from the doorway. Patty spun around, recognizing him immediately. Her face went pale as she realized she'd been caught red-handed destroying evidence. "You're Harvey Ingram," she said accusingly. "You destroyed my sister's life." "Your sister destroyed herself," Harvey replied calmly. "And you helped her poison my daughter." Harvey pulled out his phone and showed Patty the recording app that was still running. Every word of their conversation was being documented. "The FBI has been monitoring this office for weeks," Harvey continued. "They know about the payments you received from Belinda, the fake witnesses you recruited, and the threats you helped coordinate against my family." Patty's composure cracked completely. "Belinda said Emma was just being dramatic. She said you were trying to take Emma away from her and that we needed to prove what a devoted mother she was. By poisoning a 12-year-old girl? We didn't know. Belinda said the doctors were wrong, that Emma had a rare condition that mimicked poisoning symptoms. She showed us research, medical studies." Harvey stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You helped coordinate online attacks against Dr. Chambers. You helped recruit other abusive mothers to the network. You profited from my daughter's suffering." Patty backed against the wall, clutching the shredded documents. "Please, I was just trying to help my sister. I didn't know how bad. 3 children are dead because of your network." Harvey cut her off. 3 children who would be alive today if you hadn't helped their abusers escape justice. Harvey turned and walked toward the door, leaving Patty surrounded by the evidence of her crimes. "The FBI will be here in 10 minutes, he said without looking back. "I suggest you use that time to think about the children you helped kill." As Harvey left the building, his phone rang. Detective Prince had updates on the arrests. "It's bigger than we thought," the detective reported. "The financial records you provided led us to network operations in 6 other states. We're estimating over 40 children were affected by this conspiracy." Harvey felt a mixture of satisfaction and horror. Justice was being served, but the scope of the damage was staggering. What happens to Belinda now? With the federal charges and evidence of interstate conspiracy, she's looking at life in prison without parole. Same for Dr. Dalton and Wayne Greer. The network is completely dismantled. Harvey sat in his car outside the federal building, watching as news vans arrived to cover the story. His methodical investigation had exposed and destroyed a criminal enterprise that had operated with impunity for years. But the real victory wasn't the arrests or the media coverage. It was knowing that Emma would never have to fear her mother again, and that no other child would suffer because of this particular network of predators. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma's school. "Dad, can you pick me up early? I saw the news about Mom on TV, and I want to come home." Harvey smiled, started his car, and drove toward the most important person in his life. The war was over, and his daughter was finally, truly safe. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. 3 weeks after the mass arrests, Harvey sat in the federal courthouse watching Wayne Greer's bail hearing. The attorney who had built his career defending child abusers now sat in orange prison garb, his arrogance replaced by the hollow look of a man whose carefully constructed world had collapsed overnight. Emma was with her therapist, Dr. Stevenson, working through the trauma of discovering that the adults she'd trusted had been part of a larger conspiracy to harm children. Harvey had insisted she be shielded from the media coverage, but at 12 years old, she was smart enough to understand the magnitude of what had been revealed. The courtroom was packed with reporters, law enforcement officials, and families of other victims who had come forward since the arrests. Harvey recognized several parents from the Warrior Moms support groups, people who had genuinely believed they were helping wrongfully accused mothers, but now realized they'd been manipulated into enabling abuse. Federal prosecutor Josephine Gilbert stood before the judge, presenting evidence that painted a devastating picture of the conspiracy Harvey had exposed. "Your Honor, Mr. Greer's law firm received over $3.2 million in payment from the criminal enterprise over a 4-year period. Bank records show that Mr. Greer personally approved payments to witnesses who later recanted testimony against his clients, and email communications reveal his direct involvement in coaching clients to lie under oath." Greer's new attorney, a public defender who looked overwhelmed by the scope of the case, attempted to argue that his client had been providing zealous representation within ethical boundaries. But the evidence Harvey had compiled made such arguments impossible to sustain. Judge Hector Nguyen, a stern man in his 60s with a reputation for harsh sentences in cases involving children, reviewed the evidence with growing disgust. "Mr. Greer," the judge said finally, "the evidence presented suggests that you knowingly facilitated the abuse of children by helping their abusers avoid prosecution. This court finds no circumstances under which bail would be appropriate." Greer's face crumbled as he was led back to his holding cell. Harvey felt no satisfaction watching the man's breakdown, only a cold sense that justice was finally being served. The bail hearing for Dr. Louise Dalton was scheduled for that afternoon. Harvey remained in the courthouse, using the break to review the latest developments in the case with Ian Blackwell. "The pharmaceutical company angle is developing into something bigger," Ian reported. The FBI found evidence that several drug manufacturers were paying the network for advance warning about upcoming Munchausen by proxy cases. They'd remove products like Ipecac syrup from certain markets before law enforcement could establish purchase patterns. Harvey shook his head in disgust. They were literally profiting from child abuse. "It gets worse. We found communication suggesting that some companies were actually marketing products to the network, providing information about which substances would cause specific symptoms while being difficult to detect in standard blood work." The scope of the conspiracy continued to expand beyond what Harvey had initially imagined. What had started as his investigation into Belinda's abuse of Emma had uncovered a criminal enterprise that spanned multiple states and included major corporations. "What's the latest on Belinda herself?" Ian's expression grew grim. "She's trying to cut a deal. Her new attorney is claiming she was manipulated by Dr. Dalton and that she genuinely believed she was helping Emma by seeking extensive medical care." Harvey felt his anger flare. Even now, facing life in prison, Belinda was still trying to manipulate the narrative and present herself as a victim. "The prosecutors aren't buying it? Not with the evidence you compiled. The communications between Belinda and her sister show clear knowledge that she was poisoning Emma for financial gain. There's also evidence that she was recruiting other mothers to the network in exchange for referral bonuses." Dr. Dalton's bail hearing was even more devastating than Greer's. Prosecutor Gilbert presented evidence showing that Dr. Dalton had been providing false expert testimony for over a decade, helping dozens of child abusers avoid prosecution in exchange for payment. Dr. Dalton positioned herself as a champion of wrongfully accused mothers, Gilbert told the court. But evidence shows that she knew many of her clients were guilty and helped them escape justice anyway. She perverted her professional credentials to enable the systematic abuse of children. The most damning evidence came from Dr. Dalton's own files, which Harvey had helped the FBI obtain through his Dr. Daniel Holt persona. Her notes showed clear awareness that several of her clients were abusing their children, along with strategies for discrediting legitimate medical evidence. Judge Nguyen's voice was ice-cold as he addressed Dr. Dalton directly. Dr. Dalton, you held yourself out as an expert in child psychology while simultaneously enabling the abuse of the very children you claim to protect. Your actions represent a profound betrayal of professional ethics and human decency. Bail is denied. As Dr. Dalton was led away, Harvey noticed several other parents in the courtroom, people whose children had died or suffered permanent damage because of the network's intervention in their abuse cases. Some were crying. Others looked shell-shocked by the revelation that professionals they trusted had been part of a criminal conspiracy. That evening, Harvey received a call from Emma's school principal, Preston Sims. Mr. Ingram, I wanted to let you know that several other parents have come forward with concerns about their children's medical histories. It appears that your wife may have been recruiting other mothers from our school community to her network. Harvey felt sick. How many children? We're still investigating, but it looks like at least 6 families were influenced by Mrs. Ingram's advice about seeking extensive medical care for minor symptoms. 3 of those children were subsequently hospitalized for mysterious illnesses. Harvey realized that Belinda's crimes extended even beyond what the FBI had uncovered. She hadn't just been abusing Emma. She'd been actively recruiting other mothers to abuse their children, using her reputation as a devoted mother to gain their trust. What can I do to help? The school district is cooperating fully with law enforcement. But Mr. Ingram, I think you should know, several parents have asked if they can thank you personally for exposing this network. Without your investigation, their children might still be in danger. After the call ended, Harvey sat in his office looking at the wall of evidence he'd compiled over the past months. Photos of Emma's recovery, financial records documenting the conspiracy, communications between network members discussing their crimes. It was the most complex and important case of his career. But the real measure of his success wasn't the number of arrests or the media coverage. It was Emma's laughter echoing through the house as she played with friends who came to visit after school, something that hadn't happened in over 2 years while she was being systematically poisoned. His phone rang with a call from Detective Prince. Harvey, I wanted to give you a heads up. Patty McGraw's attorney is claiming she was manipulated by her sister and wants to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. Harvey considered this development. What's she offering? Information about network operations in other states, names of additional conspirators, and details about how they recruited new victims. It could help us identify more children who were harmed by this enterprise. And her sentence? Probably 10 to 15 years instead of life. The prosecutors think her information could prevent future abuse by exposing the full scope of the network. Harvey found himself conflicted. Patty McGraw had helped poison his daughter and threatened his family, but her cooperation could save other children from similar abuse. What do you think I should do? That's not my decision to make, Detective Prince replied. But I will say this. The information she's providing has already led to arrests in 3 other states. Her cooperation is helping us shut down the entire network, not just the Chicago operation. That night, as Harvey tucked Emma into bed, she asked the question he'd been dreading. Dad, why did Mom want to hurt me? Harvey sat on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. Your mom is sick in a way that made her think hurting you would get her the attention she wanted from other people. She convinced herself that she was helping you, but she was really hurting you to make herself feel important. Emma nodded solemnly. Dr. Stevenson said some people hurt children because they're broken inside. That's right. But Emma, what happened to you wasn't your fault, and you never have to worry about being hurt like that again. Because you stopped her? Harvey smiled. brushing a strand of hair from his daughter's forehead. "Because I love you more than anything in the world, and I will never let anyone hurt you again." As Emma drifted off to sleep, Harvey realized that his revenge against Belinda and her network was complete. They would spend the rest of their lives in prison, their reputations destroyed, their criminal enterprise dismantled. But more importantly, Emma was safe, healing, and surrounded by people who genuinely loved and protected her. That was the only victory that truly mattered. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 6 months after the arrests, Harvey stood in Chicago Memorial Hospital's conference room, addressing a gathering of medical professionals, law enforcement officials, and child protection advocates. The same hospital where Dr. Chambers had first recognized Belinda and saved Emma's life was now hosting a symposium on identifying and preventing Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Emma sat in the front row, healthy and confident in a way she hadn't been for years. At her request, she'd been allowed to attend the presentation where her father would be speaking about recognizing the warning signs of medical child abuse. Her therapist, Dr. Stevenson, sat beside her, proud of how far Emma had come in her recovery. The network we exposed operated successfully for over a decade because they understood how to exploit the medical system's greatest strength, our trust in concerned parents, Harvey told the assembled audience. Medical professionals are trained to believe caregivers who report symptoms and seek treatment for their children. This trust is essential for proper pediatric care, but can also be weaponized by those who would harm children for personal gain. Harvey's presentation included detailed case studies from the conspiracy, showing how the network had systematically manipulated medical professionals, legal proceedings, and public opinion. But he was careful to protect the privacy of the children who had been victimized, including Emma. Dr. Chambers, who had become something of a hero in the medical community for his role in exposing Belinda, joined Harvey for the question and answer session. "The key is pattern recognition," Dr. Chambers explained. "Individual symptoms can have innocent explanations, but when you see repeated hospitalizations with symptoms that only occur in the presence of a specific caregiver, and that caregiver is unusually knowledgeable about medical terminology while being dismissive of the child's distress, you need to consider the possibility of induced illness." After the presentation, Harvey was approached by several parents whose children had been victims of similar abuse. Some were families he'd identified during his investigation, while others had come forward after the media coverage of the arrests. "Mr. Ingram," said a woman named Charlotte Copeland, whose son had been systematically poisoned by his stepmother, "I wanted to thank you. Because of your investigation, my ex-husband's wife was arrested before she could cause permanent damage. My son is alive because you had the courage to expose this network." Similar conversations continued throughout the day. Harvey learned that his investigation had ultimately led to the identification of over 60 children who had been victims of the network, with prosecutions ongoing in 12 states. 3 pharmaceutical companies were facing federal charges for their role in the conspiracy, and legislation was being drafted to strengthen reporting requirements for suspicious patterns of rare medication purchases. But the victory that meant the most to Harvey was the simplest: Emma's recovery. She'd gained 30 pounds since leaving the hospital, her grades were back on track, and she'd made several close friends at school. Most importantly, she'd regained the trust and joy that Belinda's abuse had nearly destroyed. That evening, as Harvey and Emma walked through their neighborhood after dinner, she brought up a subject they'd been discussing with Dr. Stevenson. "Dad, I've been thinking about what I want to do when I grow up," Emma said. "Oh, what are you thinking?" "I want to help other kids who get hurt like I did. Maybe be a doctor or a police officer or something that helps people." Harvey smiled, proud of his daughter's resilience and compassion. "Those are all wonderful choices. You've got plenty of time to decide. Dr. Stevenson says that sometimes people who get hurt can use their experience to help others heal. Is that what you did when you caught Mom and her friends?" Harvey considered the question carefully. "In a way, yes. I used the skills I learned from my job to make sure that what happened to you wouldn't happen to other children." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment before Emma asked another question. "Do you think Mom will ever get better?" Harvey had been dreading this conversation, but Dr. Stevenson had advised him to be honest while age-appropriate. "I don't know, sweetheart. The doctors say that people who hurt children the way your mom did rarely get completely better. That's why she's going to stay in prison for a very long time, to make sure she can't hurt anyone else. Emma nodded thoughtfully. I feel sad for her sometimes, but I'm not scared anymore. You never have to be scared again, Harvey assured her. And it's okay to feel sad for her. Having complicated feelings about someone who hurt you doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. Later that night, Harvey received a call from Ian Blackwell with the final updates on the prosecutions. Belinda took a plea deal, Ian reported. Life in prison without parole. She'll never see freedom again. Harvey felt a complicated mix of satisfaction and sadness. Justice had been served, but the woman he'd once loved was gone forever, replaced by a stranger who had tried to kill their daughter for attention and money. What about the others? Dr. Dalton got life without parole as well. Wayne Greer got 40 years. Patty McGraw's cooperation earned her 15 years, but she'll be eligible for parole in 8 with good behavior. Harvey nodded. The sentences were appropriate for the magnitude of their crimes. There's something else, Ian continued. The FBI wants to offer you a consulting position. They're creating a task force focused on identifying and dismantling networks that exploit children, and they want someone with your investigative skills and understanding of how these conspiracies operate. Harvey considered the offer. It would be meaningful work, using his abilities to protect other children from predators who operated through manipulation and institutional exploitation. I'll think about it, he said. The next morning brought news that would have shocked Harvey a year earlier. Several major news outlets wanted to interview him about his investigation and the techniques he'd used to expose the network. Publishers were interested in his story, and there had even been inquiries from television producers about dramatizing the case. But Harvey's priorities had changed fundamentally. Fame and recognition were less important than ensuring Emma's continued healing and protecting other vulnerable children. He agreed to one major interview, with the stipulation that Emma's privacy would be protected and that any proceed from the story would go toward funding research and support programs for children who had been victims of medical abuse. A year after the arrests, Harvey stood in his renovated home office, no longer the war room where he'd planned his campaign against Belinda's network, but a normal workspace where he balanced his consulting work for the FBI task force with his restored private practice. Emma burst through the door after school, excited to share news about a science project she'd been working on, research into the psychological effects of long-term low-dose poisoning on children. Her teacher had been so impressed with her work that she'd been invited to present her findings at a regional science fair. Dad, look at this. Emma showed him a chart documenting the recovery patterns of children who had been victims of medical abuse. Did you know that kids who get the right help can actually become stronger than they were before they got hurt? Harvey looked at his daughter, healthy, confident, and passionate about helping others who had faced similar trauma, and realized that Emma had already become the person she was meant to be. The abuse had been a terrible detour in her life, but it hadn't broken her. If anything, it had revealed her extraordinary resilience and compassion. That's called post-traumatic growth, Harvey explained. It means that surviving something difficult can sometimes make people stronger and more understanding of others who are struggling. Is that what happened to you too? Emma asked perceptively. Harvey smiled, realizing that his daughter was right. The investigation that had destroyed Belinda's network and saved Emma's life had also transformed him from a methodical forensic accountant into someone who understood the importance of fighting for vulnerable children, even when that fight required methods beyond conventional legal procedures. I think it is, he admitted. That evening, as Harvey tucked Emma into bed, she shared her latest decision about her future career. Dad, I've decided I want to be a forensic psychologist. Like you find the truth in numbers, I want to find the truth in people's behavior. I want to help catch people who hurt children before they can hurt them as much as Mom hurt me. Harvey felt a surge of pride and love for his remarkable daughter. Emma had taken the worst experience of her young life and transformed it into motivation to protect other children. I think you'd be amazing at that, Harvey said, kissing her forehead. But remember, you've got plenty of time to explore different possibilities. I know, Emma replied sleepily. But I also know that some people need to be stopped, and I want to be someone who stops them. As Harvey turned off the lights and headed to his own room, He reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. A year ago, he'd been a man whose life was built on carefully controlled routine, trusting others to handle the parts of life outside his expertise. The discovery of Belinda's abuse had shattered that controlled world, forcing him to become someone he'd never imagined. A man willing to operate outside conventional boundaries to protect his child and expose a conspiracy that threatened vulnerable children across the country. But in destroying Belinda's network and securing Emma's safety, Harvey had also discovered something important about himself. Justice wasn't always found in courtrooms or legal proceedings. Sometimes it required the courage to fight battles that existed in the shadows, using unconventional methods to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Emma was safe now, surrounded by people who genuinely loved her and would never allow her